Welcome back to Wolf Heart Tales, where destinies are written in moonlight and queens rise from ashes. Before we dive into this epic tale of hidden royalty and fated love, holla that like button and join our pack by subscribing, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. This is The Worthless Daughter's Crown, a 15-chapter journey of a woman everyone dismissed, until a disguised king showed her the truth. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Girl Made of Shadows. The morning Vesper Thorne's life shattered and reformed. She was on her knees in dirt that tasted of humiliation. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind 3 months to the moment Destiny arrived wearing threadbare clothes and carrying secrets that would burn her world to the ground. Thornhaven was dying. Not the dramatic death of war or plague, but the slow rot of poverty and forgotten promises. Nestled in the northwestern territories where mountains met desperation, the village survived on stubborn pride and not much else. Its wolves were lean, its children too quiet, its hope buried somewhere beneath the permafrost that never quite thawed. Vesper Thorne had lived all 27 years in this place, and it had systematically carved away every piece of her worth. "You're bleeding again," old Mira noted from her porch as Vesper passed, struggling with 2 wooden buckets that sloshed water down her already soaked dress. "It's nothing," Vesper murmured, not stopping. The rope handles had worn her palms raw, again, but stopping meant listening to Myra's pity, and pity was worse than pain. The Thorne cottage squatted at the village edge, like a wounded animal too stubborn to die. Vesper's father had been a merchant once, successful enough to promise his daughters good marriages and comfortable futures. Then the bottom fell out of the northern trade routes, and Ronan Thorne's business collapsed so spectacularly that the debris was still settling 7 years later. They lost everything except the cottage and their shame. "Where have you been?" Malice's voice cut through the afternoon heat before Vesper even reached the door. Her mother appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, face carved from disapproval. "Those buckets were supposed to be here an hour ago." The well line was long. "Excuses." Malice's lips curled. "Always make excuses with you. Your sisters managed their chores without delay." Of course they did. Sable and Astrid had married well, or well enough for daughters of a ruined merchant. They had their own homes now, their own lives, their own escape routes from the sinking ship of the Thorne family name. Vesper had no such luxury. At 27, she was ancient by village standards for an unmated female. Plain, her mother called her. Difficult, said the matchmaker who'd stopped trying. Cursed, whispered the village women who'd watched her weather rejection after rejection until even the desperate males looked elsewhere. She was the daughter no one wanted, trapped in eternal service to parents who viewed her as penance for past failures. "Set those down and get started on dinner," Malice commanded. "Your father will be home soon, and if the meal isn't ready, it will be ready." Vesper's voice was colorless, hollow. She'd learned long ago that emotion only gave her mother ammunition. She set the buckets down, shook feeling back into her rope-burned hands, and disappeared into the cottage's dim interior, where at least the shadows offered some privacy for her quiet despair. That evening, after serving dinner she wouldn't eat herself. After cleaning dishes while her parents pretended she didn't exist, after mending clothes by candlelight until her eyes burned, Vesper finally escaped. The forest welcomed her like an old friend. Here, among the ancient pines and whispering aspens, she could breathe. Here, no one called her worthless or looked through her like she was made of glass. Here, her wolf could stretch beneath her skin without judgment. She found her usual spot, a moss-covered boulder overlooking a stream, and simply existed for a while. No purpose, no productivity, no performance. Just being. Beautiful, isn't it? Vesper spun so fast she nearly fell off the boulder. A man stood at the forest edge, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "Didn't mean to startle you. I'm new to the area." Her wolf stirred, alert. Strangers were rare in Thornhaven. Strangers who looked like this were unheard of. He was tall, built like someone who'd spent years doing hard labor, with long blonde hair pulled back carelessly and pale blue eyes that seemed to catch moonlight even though it was barely dusk. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots scuffed, his entire presence radiating a casual danger that made her instincts hum. "You're trespassing," she managed, hating how her voice shook. "Am I?" He glanced around with genuine curiosity. "Didn't see any markers. I'll head back to the road if this is private land." It wasn't, and they both knew it. The forest belonged to everyone and no one, common ground where Thornhaven's wolves could run when the walls of human civilization grew too tight. "It's fine," Vesper said quietly. "I should go anyway." She moved to pass him, giving him a wide berth because strange males were never truly safe, but his voice stopped her. "Those look painful." She followed his gaze to her hands, where the rope burns were angry red, welts across her palms. In the fading light, they looked worse than they felt. "They're nothing." Nothing tends to say that a lot. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You from the village?" "Yes." "Been here long?" "All my life." "Then maybe you can help me." He offered a smile that seemed genuine despite being delivered by a stranger in darkening woods. "I'm looking for work. Farm labor, repairs, anything honest. My name's Orion." Not his real name. Something whispered in the back of her mind. But then again, names were complicated things, weren't they? "Vesper," she heard herself say. "There might be work at the blacksmiths, or the Hendersons need help with their harvest." "Appreciate that." His eyes lingered on her hands again. "You need salvation for those. There's a plant that grows near water, silverleaf. Make a paste that'll help." "I know silverleaf." "Course you do." Was he laughing at her? His expression remained serious, but something in his tone suggested amusement. "Well, Vesper, thank you for not chasing me off with a stick. I'll let you get back to your evening." He turned to go, and she should have let him. Should have hurried home before full darkness fell and her mother found new reasons to criticize. But something made her speak. The roof. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "At the Thorn Cottage, east edge of the village. It's been leaking for 2 years, and I don't have money for repairs, but if you're looking to build a reputation." He turned back, and in the dimming light, his eyes seemed to glow. "Which cottage?" "The one that's falling apart. You can't miss it." Humiliation burned in her throat. "Thank you for being kind." "Kindness isn't something you should have to thank people for," Orion said quietly. "But you're welcome anyway." She fled then, embarrassed by her own desperation, by the tears threatening to spill, by the way her wolf had perked up in this stranger's presence like it recognized something her human mind couldn't grasp. Behind her, standing in the forest's embrace, Orion Shadowvane, Alpha King of Moonscar and ruler of 12 territories, watched his mate disappear into the darkness and felt his wolf howl with recognition so fierce it nearly drove him to his knees. The iron collar around his neck burned cold against his skin, blocking his scent, suppressing his aura, hiding everything that would tell her what they were to each other. But nothing could hide the truth from him. He'd found her. After 42 years of searching, of enduring council pressure and political machinations, of watching other wolves find their mates while he remained alone, he'd found her. In a dying village, wearing rope burns and resignation. Looking at him like kindness was a foreign language she'd forgotten how to speak. His wolf snarled against the collar's suppression, demanding he claim her immediately, mark her, take her somewhere safe, and never let the world touch her again. But Orion had survived 4 decades by being patient, by thinking strategically, by never revealing his hand until he controlled the entire game. So he would play the wandering labor. He would fix a roof. He would earn her trust slowly, carefully, giving her time to choose him as a man before destiny forced her hand as a king. And when the time came to reveal the truth, when the conspiracy was dismantled and his mission complete, she would know that his feelings had nothing to do with crowns or duty. She would know she'd been chosen for herself. The next morning, Vesper woke to the sound of hammering. She stumbled outside, still half asleep, to find Orion perched on her roof with borrowed tools, already replacing rotted thatch. "What are you doing?" "Fixing your roof." He didn't look down, focused on his work. "Figured I'd start early, get it done before the heat hits." Didn't ask for payment." Now he glanced down, and something in his expression made her chest ache. "You offered me advice last night. This is returning the favor." Malice appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of suspicion. "Who are you?" "Name's Orion, ma'am. Your daughter mentioned the roof needed work, and I'm building a reputation in the area. Figured this was a good place to start." "We don't have money for." "Not charging." His tone remained pleasant but firm. "I just need the work to show me around." Malice's eyes narrowed, clearly searching for the trap, the ulterior motive, the price that would eventually come due. But Orion simply returned to hammering, and after a long moment, Malice disappeared back inside with a frustrated huff. Vesper stood in the yard, uncertain, until Orion called down. "You make good tea, by chance? Throat's getting dry up here." It was such a normal request, so mundane and human, that she found herself nodding. "I'll bring some out." And so it began. Chapter 2. The King Who Knelt. 3 days passed, and Orion worked on the roof with steady determination that defied logic. Vesper brought him water at midday, tea in the mornings, and tried not to stare at the way his muscles moved beneath worn fabric as he hauled materials and hammered supports into place. Tried not to notice how her wolf preened every time he was near, how something deep in her chest pulled toward him like a magnet finding true north. It was dangerous, this feeling. Dangerous and stupid, and destined to end in heartbreak. Men like him, strong, capable, carrying themselves with unconscious authority, didn't look twice at women like her. They passed through villages like Thornhaven, took what they needed, and moved on to better prospects. She'd watched it happen a dozen times, watched her peers throw themselves at wandering males only to be left with broken hearts and empty promises. Vesper had learned to guard herself against hope. Hope was the cruelest liar. But Orion made it difficult. "You've got a leak in the north corner too," he noted on the third afternoon, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "Frames rotted all the way through. This whole structure's been neglected for years." "I know." Vesper's voice was quiet, defeated. "I've tried to keep up with repairs, but there's always something more urgent, and I don't have the skills or strength for this kind of work." "Why you?" Orion climbed down from the roof with fluid grace. "You've got parents. Sisters, from what I've heard in the village. Why does all this fall on you?" The question was too direct, too perceptive. Vesper busied herself with the water bucket, not meeting his eyes. "They have their own lives." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Silence stretched between them, broken only by chickens pecking at hard earth and the distant sound of village life carrying on without them. Then Orion spoke again, his voice gentler. "I've been watching this village for 3 days now, listening to how people talk. And you want to know what I've noticed?" She didn't answer, but he continued anyway. "Everyone here has an opinion about you. The unmarried daughter. The burden on her family. The one who couldn't catch a mate if her life depended on it." His pale eyes caught hers, held them. "But not one person has mentioned your kindness. How you help old Mira carry her groceries. How you sneak extra bread to the keeper children when their father's too drunk to provide. How you're the first to volunteer when someone needs help, even though you're drowning yourself." Vesper's throat tightened. "You've been here 3 days. You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." He took a step closer, and her wolf stirred with interest she desperately tried to suppress. "I know you're stronger than everyone gives you credit for. I know you've been carrying weight that should be distributed among 5 people, not 1. And I know—" Vesper. Malice's shriek cut through the moment like a blade. "Where's the mending I asked for this morning?" The spell broke. Vesper flinched, muscle memory from years of criticism, and immediately stepped away from Orion. "I need to go." "Wait." But she was already fleeing toward the cottage, toward duty and disappointment, toward the only life she knew how to navigate. Orion watched her go and felt his wolf rage against the iron collar's suppression. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to position himself between his mate and the woman making her flinch, to show Malice exactly what happened to those who hurt what belonged to him. But he couldn't. Not yet. His mission required secrecy, required patience, required sacrificing his own desires for the greater good of his kingdom. Alpha Darius's conspiracy was real. Orion had confirmed it through careful observation and coded messages passed through traveling merchants. Rogues were gathering in the shadow-rift borders, meeting with human hunters who carried silver weapons and bloodlust in equal measure. They were planning something catastrophic, something that could destabilize all the northern territories and shatter the fragile peace between wolves and humans. Orion needed more time to identify all the players, to understand the full scope of the threat before he could dismantle it. Which meant maintaining his disguise as a wandering laborer. Which meant staying close to Thornhaven while appearing to have no greater purpose than finding work and surviving. Which meant watching his mate suffer and doing nothing but fixing her roof. The constraint was maddening. That evening, after Malice had verbally shredded Vesper for imagined failures and real imperfections, after dinner was served and cleaned and the cottage fell into uneasy silence, Vesper escaped again. The forest welcomed her like always, but tonight the peace felt fragile. Her hands shook as she walked, her wolf pacing restlessly beneath her skin, and she couldn't explain why everything felt different now. 3 days. That's all it had been since Orion arrived. 3 days of a stranger showing her casual kindness, and suddenly her entire world felt off balance. You're here again.
She didn't startle this time.
Some part of her had known he would follow. Orion materialized from the shadows with the ease of someone who'd spent decades moving through darkness. He settled on a fallen log across from her boulder, giving her space, not crowding. It's peaceful here, he said simply. If that's all right, Vesper should send him away. Should maintain distance and propriety and all the rules that kept unmarried wolves from scandal. But the words died in her throat, and instead she found herself nodding. They sat in comfortable silence for long minutes. An owl hooted somewhere overhead. The stream sang its endless song. And slowly, Vesper felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. Can I ask you something? Orion's voice was careful, respectful. And you can tell me to mind my own business if I'm overstepping. All right. Why do you let them treat you that way?
Direct.
Brutal. The kind of question no one in Thornhaven would dare ask because everyone already knew the answer. Because she had no choice. You don't understand how things work here, Vesper said quietly. I'm 27 and unmated. In this village, that makes me a failure. An embarrassment. My father lost everything when his business collapsed, and my mother. She swallowed hard. My mother needed someone to blame. Someone to punish for the life she lost. And it was convenient. That's not your fault. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's reality. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself smaller. My sisters got out, through marriage. I'm what's left. The last obligation they can't quite shake off. If I leave, where would I go? What would I do? I have no money, no skills that translate beyond this village, no connections. I'm trapped by circumstances I didn't create and can't change. You could find a mate. Orion's tone was neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Start fresh somewhere else. Vesper laughed, and it was a hollow, broken sound. Have you looked at me? Really looked? I'm plain. I'm poor, and I'm aging out of desirability by the day. The males here tried courting me when I was younger, and my father still had prospects. When those evaporated, so did their interest. Now I'm just the unmarried daughter everyone pities or mocks depending on their mood. I've looked at you. Orion's voice dropped lower, rougher. Every day for 3 days, I've looked at you. And you want to know what I see? Don't. Vesper's voice cracked. Please don't offer false kindness. I can't handle pity right now. It's not a pity. He moved then, crossing the small clearing to crouch in front of her boulder, putting himself at eye level. It's recognition. I see someone who's been convinced she's worthless, when she's actually worth more than everyone in this village combined. I see strength that's been mislabeled as weakness. I see resilience that's been punished instead of celebrated. I see a mate. The word escaped before Vesper could stop it, carried on desperate hope she didn't know she'd been harboring. And the moment it hit the air between them, she wanted to take it back. Wanted to disappear into the forest floor and never emerge. But Orion didn't laugh, didn't mock, didn't retreat with the uncomfortable expression males wore when unwanted females got ideas above their station. Instead, his pale eyes held hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Yes, he said simply. I see a mate. Vesper's heart stopped, restarted, thundered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. You're lying. I'm not. You don't even know me. 3 days. I know enough. His hand lifted slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his calloused fingers brushed her cheek with devastating gentleness. I know you're brave enough to survive cruelty that would have broken weaker wolves. I know you're kind even when the world gives you every reason not to be. I know my wolf recognized something in you the moment I saw you struggling with those water buckets, and every hour since has only confirmed what I felt in that first instant. This doesn't make sense. Tears burned behind Vesper's eyes. Men like you don't want women like me. Men like me? Orion's thumb caught a tear that escaped. What kind of man do you think I am? Strong. Capable. Someone who could have anyone. Her voice broke on the last word. Someone who shouldn't be wasting time on a worthless. Stop. The command in his voice made her wolf sit up and take notice. Don't you ever call yourself that again. You're not worthless. You've never been worthless. The only thing wrong here is that you've been surrounded by people too blind or too cruel to see what's right in front of them. Orion. Let me court you. The words were rough, urgent. Properly. Traditionally. Let me show this village that you have worth. Let me show you. My mother will never allow it. She'll make my life even more miserable, and you'll leave eventually. Wanderers always do. And I'll be left with broken promises, and I'm not going anywhere. His other hand cupped her face now, holding her gently but firmly. Not without you. I swear it on my wolf, on everything I am. I'm not leaving you behind. The vow resonated through her bones with a weight that suggested truth. Impossible, illogical truth, but truth nonetheless. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Why me? Because you're mine. His forehead pressed against hers, and Vesper felt something profound shift in the space between them. And I'm yours. I felt it the moment I saw you, and if you're honest with yourself, you felt it too.
She had.
Her wolf had been howling at it since he arrived, but Vesper had learned to ignore her instincts, to distrust happiness, to reject hope before it could reject her first. But now, with his hands framing her face and his scent wrapping around her like safety, she couldn't quite remember why hope seemed so dangerous. I'm scared, she admitted. I know. His voice was gentle. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere.
So take your time.
Think about it. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll be waiting. He pulled back slowly, giving her space, letting her breathe. And then he did something that would echo through the coming weeks with prophetic weight. He took a knee in the forest dirt, lowering himself before her, making himself vulnerable and smaller than the woman everyone called worthless. You don't kneel for anyone, Vesper Thorn, Orion said quietly. And neither will anyone who wants to be part of your life. Remember that. Then he stood and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Vesper alone with her racing heart and a hope so fragile it felt like glass in her trembling hands. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know because of the iron collar blocking all recognition, was that the man who just knelt before her was a king. And kings didn't kneel for anyone, except, apparently, for their mates. Chapter 3. Whispers and Water. The morning after Orion's confession in the forest, Vesper woke with her heart tangled in equal parts terror and exhilaration. Let me court you. The words replayed in her mind like a song she couldn't quite believe was real. Men didn't court her. Men didn't see her as anything beyond an obligation or a cautionary tale. And yet Orion, strong, Mysterious, impossibly kind Orion had looked at her like she was something precious. It had to be a trick, a cruel joke. Reality didn't work this way for women like her. But when she emerged from the cottage to start her morning chores, there he was, already on the roof, already working, and when he caught sight of her, his entire expression transformed into something warm and genuine. "Morning," he called down. "Sleep well?" "Well enough." The lie tasted bitter, but admitting she'd been awake half the night replaying their conversation felt too vulnerable. "You didn't have to come back." "Yes, I did." His tone brooked no argument. "The roof's not finished. And besides, I told you I wasn't going anywhere." Heat crept up Vesper's neck. She ducked her head, busying herself with the water buckets, but she could feel his gaze following her like sunlight. The village noticed, of course. Thornhaven was too small and too starved for entertainment not to notice when a strange male spent consecutive days working on the Thorn cottage. By mid-morning, the whispers had already started circulating through the market square like poison in the water supply. "Did you see him? Working on that roof like he's got some kind of stake in it. Poor fool probably doesn't realize what he's getting himself into. Malice will eat him alive and spit out the bones. Or maybe he's desperate. Can't find work elsewhere, so he's targeting the desperate daughter." Vesper heard them. She always heard them. The village had never learned to whisper quietly enough, or perhaps they simply didn't care if she overheard. After 27 years, their cruelty had become white noise, always present, always painful, but no longer shocking. What was shocking was Orion's response when he overheard old Garrett muttering something particularly vicious about charity cases while passing the cottage. "Excuse me." Orion's voice cut through the afternoon heat with unexpected authority. He climbed down from the roof with deliberate slowness, giving Garrett his full attention. "Did you have something you wanted to say to me directly?" Garrett, a weathered male who'd never missed an opportunity to remind the village of his own superiority, blinked in surprise. "I was just commenting that you're wasting time on a lost cause, boy. No shame in moving on to better prospects. Better prospects than a woman who works herself to exhaustion caring for an ungrateful family? Better than someone who shows kindness to those who deserve it least." Orion's pale eyes glinted dangerously. "I think our definitions of better might differ significantly. She's 27 and unmated."
There's a reason for that.
"Yes, there is." Orion stepped closer, and something in his posture made Garrett instinctively retreat. "The reason is that every male in this village has been too short-sighted to see value when it's standing right in front of them. Their loss, my gain. You'll regret. The only thing I regret is not arriving sooner." The finality in Orion's tone ended the conversation. He turned his back on Garrett, a dismissal more cutting than any insult, and returned to his work. Vesper, watching from the doorway with her heart in her throat, felt something crack open inside her chest. He'd defended her.
Publicly.
Without hesitation or shame. When has anyone ever done that? That evening, after another tense dinner where Malice found 17 different ways to criticize Vesper's cooking, her posture, her existence, Vesper fled to the forest again. She was beginning to think of it as their place now, hers and Orion's, even though claiming ownership of anything felt dangerous. He was already there when she arrived, sitting on the fallen log, looking up at stars just beginning to emerge in the deepening twilight. "You heard," Vesper said quietly, settling onto her usual boulder. "I said it loud enough for the whole village to hear." Orion didn't look at her, but she could hear the smile in his voice. "Figured it was time people understood I'm serious." "You shouldn't have done that. You've made yourself a target now. The village will." "Will what?" Now he did turn, eyebrows raised. "Gossip? Judge? Whisper behind my back." His expression softened. "Vesper, I've survived things far more dangerous than small-minded villagers with sharp tongues. Their opinions can't hurt me, but they can hurt me." The words escaped raw and honest. "When you leave, and you will leave eventually, everyone does, I'll still be here. And they'll remind me every single day that I was foolish enough to believe someone like you could actually want someone like me. Orion was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight that seemed to press against her bones. What if I told you I have no intention of leaving without you? Then I'd say you don't know what you're promising. Try me. Vesper wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. I come with nothing, Orion. No dowry, no connections, no skills beyond menial labor and survival. My family name is worthless. Worse than worthless. It's a liability. And her voice cracked. I'm damaged. Years of being told I'm not enough, that I'm a burden, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of kindness come my way. It's left marks. I don't know how to be courted. I don't know how to believe in happy endings. I don't even know how to accept that someone might genuinely want me. Then let me teach you. The simplicity of the statement stole her breath. How? She whispered. Orion stood, crossed the small clearing, and extended his hand. Start by trusting me. Just for tonight.
Can you do that?
Vesper stared at his outstretched hand. Calloused from work, scarred from life, steady despite everything. It was such a small gesture. Such a simple request.
Trust me.
When had she last trusted anyone? Slowly, her hand lifted and settled into his palm. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, and she saw his eyes flash with something fierce and possessive before he carefully controlled his expression. Good, he murmured. Now stand up. She did, and suddenly they were close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell cedar and winter frost, and something wild that made her wolf perk up with interest. I'm going to ask you questions, Orion said quietly, and I want you to answer honestly. No lies to protect yourself or spare my feelings. Just the truth.
Can you do that?
I'll try. Good enough. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, soothing, grounding. First question. Do you feel the pull between us? The connection? Yes. The word escaped before her defenses could catch it. Does it scare you? Terrifies me. Why? Because good things don't happen to me. Her voice broke. Because every time I've hoped for something better, reality has crushed that hope so thoroughly I've learned to stop hoping at all. Because this you feels too good to be true, and I know from experience that things too good to be true usually are. Orion's free hand lifted to cup her face, tilting her head up, so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it. Really hear it. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. You deserve good things, Vesper. You deserve kindness without cruelty attached. You deserve to be valued and protected and cherished. And the fact that you haven't received those things doesn't mean you're not worthy of them. It means you've been surrounded by people who didn't deserve you. You don't know that. You don't know what I know enough. His voice was firm but gentle. I know you've survived circumstances that would have broken stronger wolves. I know you've maintained your kindness despite every reason to become bitter and cruel. I know my wolf recognized its mate the moment I saw you, and my instincts have never been wrong.
Mate.
There was that word again, dropping between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples through everything. How can you be sure? Vesper's question was barely audible. 3 days ago, you didn't even know I existed. 3 days ago, I was searching without knowing what I was looking for. Orion's forehead pressed against hers in a gesture so intimate it made her knees weak. Now I've found it. Found you. And I'm not letting go unless you tell me to. What if I'm too broken to be what you need? What if you're exactly what I need, broken pieces and all? The question hung between them, unanswerable and profound. Vesper felt tears slip down her cheeks. When had she started crying? And Orion caught them with his thumbs, wiping them away with devastating gentleness. I'm scared, she admitted again. I know. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. You keep saying that, because I keep meaning it. He pulled back slightly, giving her space to breathe. Let me prove it to you. Let me court you properly. Let me show this village, and you, that you have worth, that you've always had worth. My mother will make it impossible. Your mother's approval isn't required. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You're 27 years old, Vesper. Old enough to make your own choices. Old enough to accept or reject courtship based on your own desires, not your family's opinions. That's not how things work here. Then maybe it's time things worked differently. The revolutionary nature of that statement should have frightened her, should have sent her running back to the safety of familiar misery. But instead, Vesper felt something long dormant begin to stir in her chest. Defiance.
Hope. Possibility.
If I say yes, she said slowly, if I let you court me, it won't be easy. The village will judge us. My mother will make both our lives miserable. And if it doesn't work out, it will work out. You can't know that. Yes, Orion said with absolute certainty. I can. The conviction in his voice shouldn't have been reassuring. It was too much, too fast, too impossible. But somehow it settled over her like a warm blanket, and Vesper found herself nodding before her logical mind could construct proper objections. Okay, she whispered. Okay.
Court me.
Prove me wrong about everything I've learned to believe. The smile that split Orion's face was devastating. He raised her scarred hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a vow. Challenge accepted. What neither of them saw, what the forest shadows carefully concealed, was the figure watching from the tree line. One of Alpha Darius's scouts, noting the interaction, memorizing faces, preparing a report that would soon make its way to powers who would find this development very interesting indeed. Because a wandering laborer courting a worthless village woman wouldn't merit attention. But if that laborer was something more, if his scent was wrong, his aura suppressed, his very presence a disguise, then this courtship became something else entirely. It became leverage. The conspiracy Orion had come to investigate was about to discover he was in their territory. And they were about to make his mission infinitely more complicated. But that night, wrapped in forest darkness and fragile hope, neither Vesper nor Orion knew that time was running out. They only knew that against all odds and logic, they'd found each other. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 4. The Roof. The formal courtship began with bread. Vesper woke the morning after their forest conversation to find a loaf wrapped in clean cloth sitting on the cottage doorstep. Still warm, fragrant with herbs, clearly made by hands that knew their way around a kitchen. Tucked beneath it was a note in surprisingly elegant handwriting. First breakfast of many.
Oh.
Her heart did something complicated and painful in her chest. Malice found her standing there, clutching the bread like it might disappear if she loosened her grip, and her mother's expression curdled into something ugly. What is that? Bread. Vesper's voice came out steadier than she felt. A gift. From that drifter? Malice's lip curled. He's making his intentions public then. How desperate you must look to the village, accepting courtship from a man with nothing.
He's kind to me.
The words emerged quiet but firm. That's more than I've received from anyone else. Kind. Malice laughed, sharp and bitter. Men aren't kind without expecting something in return. And when you're 27 and unmarried, people assume they know what that something is. The implication hit like a physical blow, but Vesper held her ground. Then let them assume. I'm accepting his courtship. You're what? I'm 27 years old. Vesper repeated Orion's words from the night before, drawing strength from them. Old enough to make my own choices. I'm accepting his courtship, and if you want to object, you'll have to take it up with him. She walked back inside before her mother could respond, before her courage could fail, and allowed herself a small, secret smile. Defiance tasted sweeter than she'd imagined. The village's reaction was predictably swift and merciless. By mid-morning, everyone knew that the worthless Thorn daughter was being courted by the mysterious drifter. The gossip spread like wildfire, crackling with speculation and judgment. She must have offered him something. Money? Favors. What money? The Thorns are destitute. Then you know what she offered. Poor fool doesn't know what he's getting into. Or maybe he does. Maybe he's exactly as desperate as she is. Vesper heard every whisper, felt every judgmental stare, and discovered something surprising. She didn't care as much as she'd expected. Let them talk. Let them judge. For the first time in her life, Someone had chosen her freely, and their opinions couldn't change that. Orion appeared mid-afternoon with more materials for the roof, and this time he brought something else, a wooden box containing salve for her rope-burned hands. Silverleaf paste, he explained, pressing the box into her palms. Made it last night. Should help with the scarring. You made this? For me. Who else would I make it for? His expression was so genuinely confused by her surprise that it made her chest strake. Vesper opened the box with trembling fingers. The salve inside smelled clean and medicinal, and when she applied a small amount to her damaged palms, the cooling relief was immediate. Thank you, she whispered. No one's ever. I know. Orion's voice gentled. But they should have. You shouldn't have to thank someone for basic care, Vesper. It should be a given. Before she could respond, Sable appeared around the corner of the cottage, her expression a complicated mixture of curiosity and something that looked almost like envy. So it's true, Vesper's younger sister said, studying Orion with obvious interest. You're courting my sister. I am. Orion straightened to his full height, and Vesper noticed how Sable unconsciously stepped back. There was something in his bearing, an authority that seemed at odds with his wanderer's clothes. Why? Sable's question was blunt. No offense to Vesper, but you could probably do better. You're clearly capable, strong. Why tie yourself to the most remarkable woman in this village? Orion interrupted smoothly. Because I recognize value when I see it. The real question is why no one else here has bothered to look past their own prejudices. Sable's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Finally, she managed. Mother won't allow it. Your mother's permission isn't required. The steel in Orion's voice made even Vesper shiver. Vesper is an adult. She makes her own decisions about who courts her. But nothing. Orion's tone softened slightly. If you came here with genuine concern for your sister's well-being, I respect that. If you come to cause problems, I suggest you reconsider. Sable stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. Then she looked at Vesper. Really looked, and for the first time in years, Vesper saw something other than dismissal in her sister's expression. He's different, Sable said quietly. From the others who've courted you. He actually seems like he means it. Vesper finished. Yeah. Sable's voice dropped even lower. Maybe hold on to this one, VS. Men who look at you like that don't come around often. She left without another word, and Vesper stood frozen in shock. Had her sister just supported her? Acknowledged that Orion's courtship might be genuine? That went better than expected, Orion noted mildly, returning to his work on the roof. That went impossibly well. Vesper's mind was still reeling. Sable hasn't spoken to me like that, like I'm a person she actually cares about in years. Maybe she's remembering who you are beneath all the damage your mother's inflicted. Orion glanced down at her, and the warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. Or maybe seeing someone value you is reminding her that she should too. The roof was finally completed 3 days later, and Orion's next project was the sagging front porch that had been threatening collapse for months. Then the garden fence. Then the cracked window frames. Each repair was meticulous, professional, executed with a skill that seemed far beyond what a simple wandering laborer should possess. But no one in Thornhaven questioned it. They were too busy gossiping about the courtship itself to analyze the quality of his work. Vesper and Orion fell into a rhythm. Mornings, he worked while she completed her chores, stealing glances at each other when they thought the other wasn't looking. Midday, she brought him food and water, and they'd really talk, about everything and nothing. She learned he'd traveled extensively through the Northern Territories, that he was older than he looked, 42, though he moved with the grace of someone decades younger. That he'd lost people he loved and carried their memories like weights he'd learned to balance. What she didn't learn, because he carefully avoided those topics, was where he'd traveled from, what family he'd left behind, or why a man his age wandered alone without a pack or purpose. The questions tickled at the back of her mind, but every time she tried to ask, something stopped her. Perhaps instinct warning that some truths were better discovered slowly. Or perhaps fear that knowing more might shatter the fragile happiness she was building. So she didn't push. And Orion didn't volunteer. And the conspiracy he was investigating continued to unfold in the shadows while he played at being a simple laborer courting a worthless woman. 2 weeks into the courtship, Kieran arrived. Vesper was at the well, struggling with the bucket mechanism that had jammed again, when a voice spoke behind her. Need help with that? She turned to find a stranger watching her, tall, dark-haired, with sharp features and assessing eyes that seemed to catalog everything in seconds. He wore traveling clothes, but finer than Orion's, and carried himself with military precision. "I've got it," Vesper said warily. Strange males approaching women at wells rarely ended well. "Kieran Vale," he introduced himself, ignoring her dismissal. "I'm looking for someone. Tall, blonde, pale eyes. Goes by the name Orion. Have you seen him?" Every instinct Vesper possessed screamed danger. This man knew Orion. I was looking for him. And something about the way he asked suggested this wasn't a friendly reunion. "Why are you looking for him?" Kieran's expression shifted, became more guarded. "That's between him and me. So you do know him." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He stepped closer, and Vesper's wolf bristled with warning. "Your scent is all over him. Or it would be if." He trailed off, eyes narrowing. "Interesting. He's masking." "Why would he need a mask?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Kieran's smile was sharp. "Listen, sweetheart. Don't call her that." Orion's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He materialized from the direction of the Thorn Cottage, moving with predatory grace, and Vesper watched in fascination as Kieran's entire posture changed. Relief, respect, and something that looked almost like deference. "There you are," Kieran said, the sharp edge leaving his voice. "Been searching for 3 days. You're harder to track when you're hiding your—" "Kieran." The warning in Orion's tone was unmistakable. "Not here."
Right.
"My apologies." Kieran glanced at Vesper with new interest. "This is the one then?" "This is Vesper." Orion moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "And whatever you need to discuss, we'll do it privately." "Understood." But Kieran's eyes lingered on Vesper with calculation that made her skin crawl. "Nice to meet you, Vesper. I suspect we'll be seeing more of each other." He disappeared into the village, leaving Vesper alone with Orion and 1,000 questions screaming in her mind. "Who is he?" she asked quietly. "A friend." Orion's jaw was tight. "Someone I've worked with before?" "He was looking for you. Tracking you." "I know. Why?" "It's complicated." "That's not an answer." Vesper turned to face him fully. "Orion, who are you?" "Really?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to address. Orion looked at her, really looked, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Truth versus secrecy. Trust versus mission. Finally, he said, "I'm someone who's trying to do the right thing while navigating circumstances beyond my control. And I promise you, when I can explain everything, I will. But right now, I'm asking you to trust me a little longer." "That's asking a lot." "I know." His hand found hers, squeezed gently. "But I'm asking anyway." Vesper studied his face, searching for deception and finding only sincerity mixed with desperation. Whatever he was hiding, he clearly believed it was necessary. The question was whether she trusted him enough to wait for the truth. Her wolf said yes immediately, unhesitatingly. Her scarred human heart was more cautious. But in the end, trust was a choice. And she'd already chosen him. "Okay," she whispered. "But Orion? When the time comes, I want the truth. All of it. You'll have it." His voice was rough with emotion. "I swear it." That night, after Kieran and Orion disappeared into the forest for hours, after Vesper lay awake worrying about secrets and lies and the man who'd somehow become essential to her existence, Orion returned to the cottage. He stood beneath her window in the moonlight and whispered her name. She climbed out, breaking every rule of propriety, and found him waiting with an expression that looked almost like pain. "I'm running out of time," he said quietly. Things are moving faster than I anticipated, and soon I'm going to have to make choices that will affect both of us. But before that happens, I need you to know something. What? That this, he gestured between them, is real. Whatever else is happening, whatever you learn about me when the truth comes out, this is real. My feelings for you are real. And if you can hold on to that when everything else seems uncertain, it might be enough. You're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and feeling his heart thunder beneath her ear. Just remember that I chose you. Not because of duty or politics or anything except recognizing my mate. Remember that when it matters most. Orion. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and devastating, and Vesper tasted goodbye in it even though he was still here, still holding her, still whispering promises against her lips. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were bright with something that looked suspiciously like tears. I need to ask you something, he said. And you can say no. You should probably say no, given how little time we've had together. But I'm asking anyway. What? Marry me. Chapter 5. Blood Moon Binding. Vesper's world tilted sideways. What? Marry me. Orion's hands framed her face, his pale eyes burning with intensity in the moonlight. I know it's fast. I know it's insane. I know you have every reason to say no. But I'm asking anyway because time is running out, and I need you to be mine in every way that matters before. Before what? Fear clawed at her throat. Orion, you're talking like you're about to disappear. Like this is goodbye. It's not goodbye. His thumbs traced her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. But things are about to change. Dramatically. And when they do, I need to know you're bound to me. Protected. Mine in ways that no one can contest or take away. This doesn't make sense. 2 weeks ago, you were a stranger. Now you're asking me to trust that what we feel is real. He pressed his forehead against hers. To trust that mate bonds don't follow convenient timelines. To trust that sometimes the right choice is the insane one. Vesper's mind raced. Every logical part of her screamed this was madness. You didn't marry men you'd known for 2 weeks. You didn't bind yourself to wanderers with mysterious pasts and friends who tracked them through villages. You didn't make life-altering decisions based on feelings that defied explanation. But her wolf was howling yes with such ferocity it drowned out logic. And beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, was a simple truth. She'd never felt this alive, this seen, this wanted in her entire life. If I say yes, she whispered, what happens next? We hand fasten. Tonight, under the full moon, with the old words. It's legally binding among wolves, recognized by pack law even if your village would consider it barbaric. My mother will kill me. Your mother doesn't own you. Steel entered his voice. And after tonight, she'll have no claim on you at all. You'll be mine, and I protect what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through her body, waking parts of herself she'd learned to suppress. The village will judge us. The village already judges you. At least this way, you'll have someone standing between you and their cruelty. You're asking me to burn every bridge I have. I'm asking you to stop setting yourself on fire to keep bridges warm that lead nowhere you want to go. His voice softened. But if you're not ready, if this is too much, too fast, I'll wait. I'll court you properly, slowly, until you're certain. I just need you to know that I'm certain. I've been certain since the moment I saw you. Vesper pulled back enough to study his face. Really study it. The sharp planes and angles, the pale eyes that saw too much, the jaw clenched with tension. This man was asking her to leap off a cliff with him, trusting he'd catch her before she hit the ground. Everything she'd learned about survival said to refuse. Everything her heart screamed said to jump. Teach me the words, she heard herself say. If we're doing this, I want to do it right. The relief that flooded Orion's expression was almost painful to witness. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. Thank you, he murmured against her lips. Thank you for trusting me. I'm probably insane. definitely insane. His smile was crooked, beautiful. But I promise I'm worth the madness. They left the village under cover of darkness, slipping into the forest like thieves stealing something precious. Orion led her deeper than she'd ever ventured, to a clearing she didn't know existed where moonlight poured through the canopy like liquid silver. This is a sacred place, he explained quietly. Old magic lingers here, the kind that recognizes truth when it's spoken. How do you know about this place? I've traveled extensively. You learn to recognize power when you're sensitive to it. He turned to face her, taking both her hands. Ready?
No. But do it anyway.
He smiled at that, then began teaching her the words. They were ancient, almost musical, in a language that predated modern pack structures. Vesper repeated them until they flowed naturally, until her tongue remembered shapes her mind couldn't explain. Now, Orion said when the moon reached its zenith, we speak them together. And once spoken, they can't be taken back. This is your last chance to change your mind. Vesper looked at him. This mysterious man who'd appeared in her life like destiny wearing borrowed clothes, and felt certainty settle in her bones. I don't want to change my mind. They spoke the words in unison, their voices weaving together in the moonlit clearing. Vesper felt something shift as the final syllable left her lips, a click, like a lock finding its tumbler, like two puzzle pieces finally sliding into place. Magic hummed in the air around them, ancient and approving. Now we seal it, Orion murmured, and his mouth claimed hers with hunger that had been carefully leashed until this moment. Vesper melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her wolf singing with recognition and triumph. This was right. This was real. This was... The bond tried to snap into place. She felt it reaching for her, sensed something profound trying to connect, but it hit a wall she couldn't see. Confusion flickered through her pleasure, but before she could examine it, Orion was kissing her deeper, drowning her questions in sensation. You're mine now, he whispered against her throat. In every way that matters. Mine to protect. Mine to cherish. Mine. And you're mine, she managed, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. Always have been. From the moment I saw you. They made love in that clearing under the full moon's witness, and Vesper discovered that her body knew things her mind had never learned. I discovered that pleasure could be devastating and gentle all at once. Discovered that being touched with reverence could feel more powerful than any crown. Afterward, wrapped in Orion's arms with her head on his chest and their legs tangled together, Vesper felt peace settle over her for the first time in memory. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we go back. Face your family. Make it official in ways the village can't ignore. His arms tightened around her. And I protect you from whatever comes next. You keep saying that something terrible is coming. Something is coming. His voice was grim. But terrible depends on your perspective. Orion. I know. I promised you the truth when the time came. He pressed a kiss to her hair. And that time is almost here. Just hold on a little longer. Trust me a little longer. I'm your wife now. Trusting you is part of the deal. She felt him smile against her scalp. Best deal I've ever made. They returned to the village before dawn, sneaking back through shadows, and Vesper climbed through her window just as the first birds began their morning songs. She'd been gone for hours, done something irreversible, changed her entire life in a moonlit clearing, and she didn't regret it for a second. The confrontation came 3 days later. Vesper had known it was inevitable. You couldn't handfast a wandering male in secret and expect the truth to stay buried in a village this small. Someone had seen them leave together that night. Someone always saw. The whispers started immediately, vicious and knowing. By the time Malice heard, and Vesper still didn't know who'd taken such pleasure in telling her mother, the damage was irreversible. Malice erupted into the cottage like a storm given human form. You did what? Vesper stood her ground in the kitchen, hands steady despite her thundering heart. I married him. Under the old laws. It's done. You married a drifter? Without permission? Without witnesses? Without telling your own mother? Malice's face was purple with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? What does this make you look like? It makes me look like a woman who chose her own happiness. The slap came so fast Vesper didn't see it coming. Her head snapped sideways, cheek burning, and she tasted copper. You ungrateful, stupid girl. Malice was screaming now, completely unhinged. I've sacrificed everything trying to make something of you, and this is how you repay me? By throwing yourself at the first man desperate enough to touch you. He's not desperate, and neither am I. Vesper's voice was quiet but firm. I'm in love with him, and he loves me. That's more than you and father ever had. Love. Malice laughed, high and terrible. You think love matters? Do you think feelings put food on the table or fix your father's failures? You're more naive than I thought. I'm leaving. The decision crystallized as Vesper spoke. I'll pack my things and go. You won't have to see me anymore. Won't have to pretend I'm anything but the burden you've always claimed I am. Oh no. Malice's smile turned vicious. You're not getting off that easy. If you've disgraced this family, you'll face the consequences publicly. Everyone will know what you've done. Everyone will see exactly what kind of desperate, pathetic creature my eldest daughter has become. Malice, enough. Ronan's voice came from the doorway, weak and ineffective. She's made her choice. And I'll make sure she suffers for it. Malice whirled toward the door. We're calling a village gathering. Tonight. Everyone will witness her shame. She swept out before either of them could respond, and Vesper stood alone with her father in the suddenly too quiet cottage. I'm sorry, Ronan said after a long moment. I should have stopped her years ago. Should have protected you from her cruelty. I was too weak, too focused on my own failures to see what she was doing to you. It doesn't matter now. Vesper touched her burning cheek gently. I'm leaving anyway. Where will you go? Wherever Orion goes. He's my husband now. My home is wherever he is. Ronan nodded slowly. He's different, that one. Carries himself like, well, like someone used to authority. You've chosen better than you know. What does that mean? But her father just shook his head. You'll find out soon enough. Just remember that he chose you freely. Whatever else happens, hold on to that. It was the second time someone had told her to remember Orion's choice. The repetition made her uneasy. That evening, as the sun began its descent and the entire population of Thornhaven gathered in the village square, Vesper understood what true humiliation felt like. Her mother had outdone herself. Malice stood in the center of the crowd like a performer on stage, her voice carrying to every corner as she detailed her daughter's disgrace. How Vesper had given herself to a vagrant. How she'd bound herself in secret without permission or witnesses. How she'd brought shame upon the Thorn family name. And Vesper knelt in the dirt at her mother's feet, forced into that subservient position while the village watched with expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction. Look at her, Malice proclaimed, circling her daughter like a predator. 27 years old and so desperate, she married a vagrant who arrived with nothing but threadbare clothes and a tired horse. The crowd murmured agreement, their judgment pressing down on Vesper like physical weight. Tell them, Malice demanded. Tell them how you disgraced this family by binding yourself to him, without permission. Without even informing your own mother. Vesper kept her eyes on the dirt, refusing to give her mother the satisfaction of seeing tears. She'd known this moment would come, had prepared herself for it. What she hadn't prepared for was the voice that cut through the crowd's whispers like a blade through silk. Where's this husband of yours? Someone called. Did he run when things got complicated? And then the gathered wolves began to part. Vesper's heart stuttered. She knew those footsteps, steady, unhurried, carrying a weight that seemed to bend reality around them. Orion moved through the hostile crowd with his shoulders squared and his head high. He looked every inch the wandering laborer they believed him to be. Worn leather vest, simple clothes, calloused hands. But something in his bearing made people unconsciously move aside. Something in his eyes made even the boldest villagers drop their gaze. He walked straight to where Vesper knelt and extended his hand. Get up, he said quietly, but his voice carried. You don't kneel for anyone. Chapter 6. The King's Declaration. Vesper stared at Orion's outstretched hand, scarred, steady, offered without hesitation in front of the entire village that had gathered to witness her destruction. Every instinct she developed over 27 years of survival screamed at her to refuse. To stay small. To accept her punishment and wait for the storm to pass. But she'd married this man 3 nights ago under a blood moon. Had spoken ancient words that bound them together. Had chosen defiance over safety. She placed her hand in his. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, and she felt his fingers close around hers with gentle strength. He pulled her to her feet in one smooth motion, and suddenly she was standing, not kneeling, not prostrating herself, not making herself small for anyone's satisfaction. The crowd murmured, sensing this wasn't following the expected script. "So you came back," Malice said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I expected you to be halfway to the next village by now. That's what men like you do when the fun ends, isn't it? Disappear before consequences arrive." Orion didn't answer immediately. He kept Vesper's hand in his thumb tracing soothing circles on her knuckles, and turned to face Malice with an expression of polite contempt. "I came to speak with you about your daughter," he said, his voice carrying natural authority that seemed incongruous with his borrowed clothes. "Though I see you've decided public shame is more appropriate than private conversation." "Public disgrace deserves public consequences," Malice snapped. "You seduced my daughter. I asked her to marry me. She said yes. We were handfasted 4 nights ago under the full moon with the old words spoken." Orion's tone remained calm, controlled. "I understand that's not how things are typically done here, but where I come from, the moon's blessing matters more than a village elder's signature." The whispers intensified. Handfasting was an ancient practice, rarely used except in the most remote territories. Legally binding among wolves, but considered barbaric by modern standards. "Where do you come from?" Malice repeated mockingly. "And where exactly is that? You've been here for weeks without telling anyone your history, your family, or why a man your age wanders alone. For all we know, you're a criminal, a deserter." Orion's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "I'm neither. I'm simply a man who recognized something worth protecting when he found it." "Worth protecting?" Malice laughed, and the sound was ugly. "My daughter is a burden I've tried to be rid of for years. She's plain, she's old, and she has no value. You call her worth protecting because you're desperate, not because she has any actual worth." Vesper felt the words hit like physical blows. She'd heard variations of them her entire life, but having them spoken publicly, having the entire village witness her mother's cruelty, it carved something vital out of her chest. But then Orion did something unexpected. He stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Vesper, and when he spoke, there was quiet steel in his voice that made several people unconsciously step back. "I have no family here to negotiate with, and I understand that makes this arrangement unusual. But I'm asking you formally, I want Vesper as my wife. I'll provide for her, protect her, and give her the respect she deserves. That's more than she's received under your roof." "You have nothing," Malice spat. "No property, no prospects, no." "I have enough." Orion's interruption was gentle but final. "And what I lack in possessions, I make up for in recognizing her value when everyone else in this village seems determined to convince her she is none." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Ronan finally spoke from the edge of the crowd, his voice rough. "If you take her with nothing. No dowry, no belongings except what she's wearing. We're done with her." "Done." Orion agreed, without hesitation. "And when I leave with her, don't expect us to return when you realize what you've lost. When you abandon her," Malice added viciously, "don't come crawling back. She made her choice. She'll live with the consequences. She won't need to come back." Orion's tone shifted, and something in it made the hair on Vesper's neck stand up. "Because I don't abandon what's mine." The way he said mine sent a shiver through Vesper that had nothing to do with fear. Her wolf responded to that declaration with fierce recognition, and she found herself leaning into his solid presence. But she couldn't understand why this stranger, this man she'd known for mere weeks, felt more like home than the house where she'd been raised. "You can't actually believe this will work," Sable's voice came from the crowd. Vesper's sister pushed forward, her expression conflicted. "Orion, I don't know what game you're playing, but Vesper isn't. She's not equipped for whatever life you're offering. She's never left this village. She has no skills beyond basic labor. Taking her away from everything she knows is giving her the freedom she's never had," Orion finished. "The freedom to become who she was meant to be instead of who you've all decided she should be." "And who is she meant to be?" Old Garrett called mockingly. "A wanderer's woman? Living on the road with no home, no security, no future?" Orion smiled then, and it was a dangerous expression. "You'll find out soon enough." Before anyone could respond, Kieran emerged from the crowd. Vesper had almost forgotten about Orion's mysterious friend, but now he appeared beside them with military precision, and she noticed how his presence changed the dynamic. The way he stood slightly behind Orion, not quite deferential, but definitely secondary. The way his eyes constantly scanned the crowd, cataloging threats. The way he moved like someone trained for violence. "We should go," Kieran said quietly, "before this gets uglier." "Agreed." Orion turned to Vesper. "Get whatever you need from the cottage. We're leaving tonight." "Tonight?" Panic fluttered in her chest. "But I thought." "Time's running out." His pale eyes held hers with intensity that stole her breath. "Trust me. Please." And because she'd already chosen him, because she'd already bound herself to him, because her wolf was howling that this was right even if logic disagreed, Vesper nodded. "Give me 10 minutes." She pulled away from his protective presence and walked toward the cottage on trembling legs. Behind her, she heard Orion speaking to the crowd, his voice carrying that strange authority that made people listen despite themselves. "I know you judge us. Judge her for choosing someone you consider beneath her station, though I'd argue her station here was beneath her dignity. Judge me for being an outsider with no roots or property. But here's what you'll remember when we're gone. You had someone extraordinary living among you, and you treated her like refuse. That failure is yours, not hers." Inside the cottage, Vesper grabbed the few possessions that mattered. Clothes, the book her grandmother had given her before dying, the leather pouch Ronan had returned containing coins and jewelry. It all fits into a single worn bag. She was walking out when Astrid appeared in the doorway, blocking her exit. "You're really doing this?" her younger sister asked. "Throwing away everything for a man you barely know?" "I'm not throwing anything away," Vesper said quietly. "I never had anything to begin with. Not here. Not with this family." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Vesper's voice hardened. "When was the last time any of you treated me like family, Astrid? When was the last time Mother said something kind? When was the last time Father stood up for me? When was the last time you, or Sable, acknowledged I existed unless it was to remind me of my failures?" Astrid's face crumpled. "We didn't realize." "You didn't want to realize." Vesper moved past her sister toward the door. "But maybe now, watching me leave, you'll understand what you've lost. Not that it matters anymore." Outside, the village square had descended into chaos. Malice was still ranting, demanding someone stop this travesty. Garrett was calling for the elders to intervene. Others were shouting questions and accusations. But Orion stood in the center of it all like a stone in a river, unmoved by the currents swirling around him. When Vesper emerged with her bag, his entire expression transformed into something warm and protective. "Ready, as I'll ever be." "Then let's go home." "Where's home?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Orion's smile was enigmatic. "You'll see." They started walking toward the forest edge, Kieran falling into step behind them like a guard. The crowd parted uncertainly, no one quite sure how to stop this, or if they even should. They were almost to the tree line when Malice's voice rang out one final time. "When he shows his true colors, when you realize you've made a terrible mistake, don't come begging for forgiveness. You're dead to this family. Dead to this village. Vesper flinched despite herself, but Orion's hand found hers and squeezed. Keep walking, he murmured. She can't hurt you anymore. But as they disappeared into the forest, as Thornhaven vanished behind them, Vesper couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. That the man holding her hand was about to become someone else entirely. That her life was about to shatter and reform in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. Orion led them deeper into the forest than Vesper had ever ventured. The trees grew thicker here, older, their branches intertwining overhead to create a canopy so dense it blocked out most of the fading light. Where are we going? She asked after they'd been walking for nearly an hour. Somewhere safe, Orion replied. Somewhere we can wait for the rest of my people. Your people? The truth is coming, Vesper. He glanced back at her, and in the dim light, his eyes seemed to glow. Within the next few hours, you're going to learn things about me that will seem impossible. And I need you to remember what you promised, that you'd hold on to the fact that I chose you, that this is real. You're scaring me. I know. His voice was gentle. But I'd rather scare you with the truth than lose you to lies. They reached a clearing where several horses were tethered, magnificent animals, far finer than anything a wandering laborer should own. Kieran immediately began checking their provisions while Orion helped Vesper onto one of the mares. She's beautiful, Vesper murmured, running her hand along the horse's silky neck.
She's yours now.
Orion swung onto his own mount with fluid grace. Everything I have is yours. You just don't know what that means yet. Before she could respond, howls split the night air. Not normal howls. These carried something else. Threat, warning, coordinated attack. Kieran's head snapped up. They found us. Who found us? Vesper's heart hammered against her ribs. The rogues. Orion's expression hardened into something predatory. The conspiracy I've been tracking. They know who I am now. Know what I was doing here. I don't understand. You will. He wheeled his horse around to face the direction they'd come. Kieran, get her to the rendezvous point. Don't stop for anything. What? No. Vesper reached for him, panic clawing at her throat. You're not staying here alone. I'm not alone. My guards are closing in from the south. But you need to be somewhere safe when this happens. He leaned over and cupped her face, kissing her hard and fast. Trust me. I'll come for you. I swear on everything I am. Orion. But Kieran was already pulling her horse away, and Orion was dismounting, moving toward the sounds of approaching danger with the confidence of someone who'd faced far worse. Wait. Vesper tried to pull free from Kieran's grip. What's happening? Why is he? Because he's not just a wandering laborer, Kieran said quietly. And it's time you knew exactly who you married. The first rogue broke through the tree line, a massive scarred male with wild eyes and murder in his scent. Behind him came more, at least a dozen, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of planning and purpose. They froze when they saw Orion standing alone in the clearing. Then one of them laughed. The rumors were true. The Alpha King himself, playing at being nobody. Darius was right. You're here investigating us. Alpha King. The words crashed into Vesper like a physical blow. And as she watched from the edge of the clearing, as Kieran held her back from interfering, Orion reached up to his neck. He removed something, a collar she hadn't even noticed he was wearing. So seamlessly had it blended with his appearance. The moment it came off, everything changed. Power exploded outward from Orion like a supernova, flooding the clearing with dominance so absolute it dropped every rogue to their knees. The force of it reached Vesper even at a distance, making her wolf instantly submit, and she understood with crystal clarity what she'd been too blind to see. This wasn't a wandering laborer. This wasn't even a simple alpha. This was royalty. Ancient bloodline. Power that bent the world around it. And as a scent finally hit her unfiltered, cedar and winter frost and something so primal it made her soul ache, the mate bond that had been trying to connect for weeks finally, brutally, snapped into place. Vesper gasped as recognition flooded every cell of her body. This was her mate. her destined partner, the other half of her soul. And he was a king. Chapter 7. The collar breaks. The world tilted sideways, and Vesper couldn't breathe. The mate bond crashed into her with the force of a tidal wave, overwhelming every sense, drowning every thought except one screaming truth. Mine, mine, mine. Her wolf surged forward with recognition, so fierce it nearly drove her to her knees. This wasn't a new attraction, or deepening affection. This was destiny claiming her so completely she couldn't remember what it felt like to exist without this connection burning through her veins. "No," she whispered, even as her body trembled with the intensity of it. "No, this can't. It's real." Kieran's voice was quiet beside her. The collar blocked it from you, kept you from recognizing what he felt from the moment he saw you.
But now
There was no hiding it. Vesper's hands came up to clutch her chest as if she could physically hold the bond, as if she could make sense of the way every atom in her body was screaming to go to him, to touch him, to complete the connection that was tearing her apart with its incompleteness. But Kieran held her back, and in the clearing, Orion was transforming. She'd seen wolves shift before, had shifted herself countless times. But this was something else entirely. His bones restructured with fluid grace, blonde hair transforming into pale golden fur that caught moonlight like spun silver. His form expanded, muscles rippling, until he stood easily twice the size of a normal wolf. His eyes blazed ice blue with predatory intelligence, and when he bared his teeth, the rogues cowering before him whimpered. This was the form that had led armies, that had defended kingdoms, that had never lost a battle. "My name is Orion Shadowvane." His voice carried across the clearing even in wolf form, resonating with power that made the trees seem to bend toward him. "Alpha King of Moonskar, sovereign of the 12 territories, and you've made a catastrophic mistake attacking what's mine." The lead rogue, the scarred one who'd spoken before, tried to rise, tried to mount some kind of defense. "Darius said you were here investigating. Said there was profit in exposing you before." He never finished the sentence. Orion moved like liquid shadow, covering the distance in heartbeats. His jaws closed around the rogue's throat, and the crack of vertebrae echoed across the clearing with terrible finality. The other rogues scattered, but Orion was already moving, herding them away from where Vesper sat frozen on her horse. Away from the road back to Thornhaven. Away from anything innocent or defenseless. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Vesper watched in horrified fascination as her husband, her mate, the bond screamed, dismantled the attacking force with brutal efficiency. Every movement was calculated, precise, the product of decades of combat experience. These rogues had come expecting to find a king distracted by his disguise, vulnerable and alone. They'd found an apex predator who'd been holding back for weeks and now had no reason to restrain himself. Within minutes, half the rogues lay dead or dying. The rest had fled into the forest, and Vesper could hear howls in the distance, answering calls from the south, where Orion's reinforcements were apparently closing in. Orion shifted back to human form in the space between one breath and the next, standing naked in the moonlight with blood on his hands and absolute fury in his eyes. That's when Vesper noticed the other figures emerging from the western edge of the clearing. Not rogues. Humans. A dozen men carrying crossbows loaded with silver-tipped bolts, blades that gleamed with the telltale sheen of blessed metal designed specifically to kill wolves. Well, their leader said, a scared man with calculating eyes. Darius said there might be complications. Didn't mention the complications would include royalty. "Alpha Darius is dead," Orion said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the distance. And his confession before dying implicated every single person involved in this conspiracy, including you, Marcus Holloway, former captain of the Borderlands Guard, dishonorably discharged for selling weapons to rogues. Holloway's expression flickered, surprise, then grudging respect. "You're better informed than expected. But you're also alone, outnumbered, and standing between us and a village full of wolves who won't know what killed them until it's too late." "Counter-proposal," Orion said. You surrender now, and I'll ensure your deaths are quick rather than letting the families of everyone you've killed decide your fates." Holloway raised his crossbow. "I was hoping you'd be difficult." The bolt flew true, aimed directly at Orion's heart. But he was already moving, faster than human reflexes should allow, the bolt passing through empty air where he'd been standing a fraction of a second before. His hand closed around a fallen branch, and when his power poured into it, the wood hardened into something closer to steel. "Kieran." Orion's voice was calm despite the chaos. "Get her out of here."
Now.
"No." Vesper finally found her voice, even as Kieran urged her horse forward. "I'm not leaving you. You have to." Orion's eyes found hers across the clearing, and the intensity in them stole her breath. "The bond is new.
Raw.
If something happens to me while you're this close, it could damage you permanently. Go with Kieran. I'll find you when this is finished." "But that's an order from your king." His tone gentled despite the steel in it. "Please, Vesper. I can't fight effectively if I'm worried about protecting you."
Trust me.
"I'll come for you." The mate bond howled in protest as Kieran pulled her away, every instinct she possessed screaming to stay, to fight beside him, to protect what was hers. But Orion had already turned back to the approaching hunters, and Vesper caught one final glimpse of him moving through them like a force of nature before the forest swallowed her view. Kieran led them through the darkness with practiced ease, following paths Vesper couldn't see, moving with urgency that suggested he knew exactly where they were going. "How long?" Vesper's voice cracked. "How long have you known that he's a king?" "Always. I'm his beta." Kieran glanced back at her. "That you're his mate? I suspected the moment I saw you at the well. The way he moved around you, positioned himself, the protective instinct he couldn't quite hide, it was obvious to anyone who knew him." "He lied to me."
The words tasted like ash.
"For weeks. About everything. He was undercover investigating a conspiracy that threatened the entire Northern Territories." Kieran's tone was matter-of-fact. Revealing his identity would have compromised the mission and put everyone in danger, including you. "So he married me under false pretenses." "He married you because you're his fated mate, and he wanted you bound to him before the truth came out." Kieran's voice softened slightly. "Because he knew once you learned what he was, you might think his feelings were political rather than genuine. He wanted you to choose him as a man before you had to accept him as a king." The logic was sound. The reasoning made sense. But Vesper's heart felt like it was being torn in two. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes before reaching a small clearing where more horses waited, along with at least 50 armed guards wearing silver wolf crests on their armor. The moment they saw Kieran, every guard dropped to one knee. Beta Kieran, a female guard with sharp features, said. "The king?" "Handling the remaining threats. He'll join us shortly." Kieran helped Vesper dismount, and she noticed how every guard's eyes tracked to her with undisguised curiosity. "This is Lady Vesper, the king's mate. You will address her as your majesty and protect her with your lives." "Your majesty." 50 voices spoke in unison, and Vesper felt hysteria bubble up in her throat. This was insane. This was impossible. Yesterday she'd been a worthless village woman nobody wanted. Today she was apparently royalty married to a king who'd been lying about his identity since the moment they met. "I need to sit down," she managed. Kieran guided her to a fallen log while guards created a protective perimeter around them. Someone brought her water. Someone else produced a blanket. Everyone treated her with careful reverence that made her want to scream. "How long?" she asked Kieran again. How long was he planning this? Planning what? The investigation or the courtship? Both. Kieran settled beside her, close enough to speak quietly. The investigation has been ongoing for months. Reports of rogues and hunters conspiring reached Moon's car, and the king decided the only way to truly understand the threat was to go undercover. He announced a ritual of Silent Moon, an ancient tradition where the king spends time in spiritual isolation. Then he left with just me, disguised as sent with that collar, and began traveling through the territories gathering intelligence. And meeting me? Was destiny, not planning. Kieran's expression was gentle. He felt the mate pull during a full moon ceremony 3 months ago, faint, like a thread stretched too thin to follow. But it led him north and west, toward your village. When he arrived in Thornhaven, he was focused on the investigation. Then he saw you struggling with water buckets, and his wolf recognized its mate immediately. So what? Decided to court me while investigating conspiracies? He decided he'd found something more important than any mission. Kieran met her eyes directly. I've known Orion, King Orion, for 15 years. I've never seen him lose focus on an objective. Never seen him compromise a mission for personal reasons. Until you. You changed everything. He still lied. Yes.
Kieran didn't argue.
And when he gets here, he'll have to face the consequences of that choice. But Vesper, can I call you Vesper? She nodded numbly. The man you fell in love with? The one who fixed your roof and defended you to the village and married you under the moon? That's who he is. The king is just additional context. The core of him, the person you chose, that was never a lie. How can you be sure? Because I've seen him rule. Seen him make impossible decisions and sacrifice personal happiness for the good of his people. I saw him wear the crown like a cage. Kieran's voice was quiet but certain. And I've never seen him as free, as genuinely happy, as he was in those weeks courting you. That wasn't a performance. That was him finally being allowed to be just a man. Vesper wanted to believe it. Desperately wanted to believe that the connection between them was real despite the deception surrounding it. But before she could respond, the forest erupted with the sound of approaching horses. Guards immediately formed a defensive line, weapons drawn, until Kieran raised his hand. Stand down. That's the king. Orion emerged from the tree line on his gray stallion, still wearing borrowed clothes now torn and bloodstained, his hair loose around his shoulders and his pale eyes scanning the clearing until they found Vesper. The mate bond pulled taut between them, and she felt it like a physical tether trying to drag her toward him. He dismounted in one fluid motion and started walking toward her, but Kieran stepped between them. She needs time, the beta said quietly. I know. Orion's voice was rough. But I need to see that she's all right. Please. Kieran glanced at Vesper, a question in his eyes. She nodded once. She couldn't have denied him even if she'd wanted to. The bond was too strong, too new, too demanding. Kieran stepped aside, and suddenly Orion was standing in front of her, and Vesper could see the warrior beneath the wanderer now. Could see the king in the set of his shoulders, the command in his bearing, the centuries of power coiled in his stance. Are you hurt? His hands lifted like he wanted to touch her, but was holding himself back.
No.
The bond, is it? Overwhelming. Her voice cracked. I can feel you like you're inside my skin. Like you've always been there, and I was just too blind to notice. The collar blocked it from you.
I'm sorry.
I never wanted. You lied to me. The accusation burst out raw and wounded. For weeks. About everything. Who you are, what you are, why you were even in Thornhaven. I know. You married me without telling me the truth. I know. You let me think you were nobody when you're. She gestured helplessly at the guards, the horses, the obvious wealth and power surrounding them. When you're this. I'm both. Orion's voice was gentle but firm. I'm a king, yes. But I'm also the man who fixed your roof, who carried your water, who fell in love with you not because destiny demanded it, but because you made me want to be better than I was. How can I trust anything you say now? The question hung between them, and Vesper watched something crack in Orion's expression. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm asking you to try. Because the alternative, losing you after finally finding you, would break something in me I don't think could be repaired. Vesper stood on shaking legs, needing to be eye level with him for this. Tell me the truth. All of it. Starting with your real name. Orion Shadowvane. Alpha King of Moon's Car, sovereign of the 12 territories, defender of the ancient bloodlines. His pale eyes never left hers. 42 years old. Ruled since I was 22. Spent 2 decades waiting for a mate who never appeared, until the council convinced me she didn't exist. Then 3 months ago, I felt a pull during the full moon ceremony, faint but undeniable. It led me here, to this investigation, to you. Why didn't you tell me when you first realized? Because I wanted you to choose me freely. His voice dropped lower. I've watched wolves all my life, made out of obligation or politics. Watched them bind themselves to partners they barely knew because destiny or duty demanded it. I didn't want that for us. He swallowed hard. I wanted you to love me before you had to accept me. Selfish, perhaps, but honestly. And the investigation?
Real.
Alpha Darius was facilitating meetings between rogues and human hunters, planning coordinated attacks on isolated packs. I needed to understand the full scope before I could dismantle it. Tonight was the culmination. They knew I was here, knew what I was investigating, and tried to eliminate the threat I represented. Did they? Some escaped. Most didn't. His expression was grim. But we have enough evidence and captured conspirators to prevent this from spreading further. The mission is complete. So what happens now? The question carried weight beyond its simple words, and Orion understood immediately. Now I will take you home, to Moon's Car Palace. Introduce you to the council as my mate and Luna Queen. Give you time to adjust your new life while I handle the political fallout. He paused. If that's what you want. And if it's not, pain flashed across his features. Then I'll find you a cottage somewhere safe, provide everything you need, and visit as often as you'll allow while we figure out if this can be repaired. You do that? Even though I'm your mate? Vesper. His hands finally reached for her, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. I would rather spend eternity earning your forgiveness than force you into a life you don't want. The mate bond makes us compatible, but love, real love, is a choice you make every day. I chose you in Thornhaven. Now you get to choose me back. Or not. The bond screamed at her to accept, to close the distance, to complete the connection that was tearing them both apart with its incompleteness. But Vesper's wounded heart needed more than instinct. I need time, she whispered, to process this, to understand what it means. To figure out if I can forgive the lies. Then you'll have it. Orion pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle, reverent, goodbye-shaped. As much time as you need. He stepped back, and the loss of contact made her gasp. Kieran will take you to Moon's car. You'll have private chambers, staff to attend you, protection beyond measure. The council will want to meet you, but I'll hold them off until you're ready. His voice was steady despite the devastation in his eyes. And Vesper, I love you. That was never a lie. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in a clearing surrounded by guards who called her queen, carrying a bond that felt like barbed wire wrapped around her heart, and wondering how something that should have been destiny's gift had become the most complicated thing she'd ever faced. Chapter 8. The Palace of Wolves. The journey to Moon's Car Palace took 3 days, and Vesper spent most of it in a daze. Kieran led the procession with military precision, 50 royal guards surrounding her like she was something precious and breakable, which she supposed she was. The newly bonded maid of a king, still reeling from revelations that had shattered her understanding of reality. Orion rode ahead with a smaller contingent, handling the captured conspirators and coordinating with other territories. He kept his distance, true to his word about giving her time, but Vesper felt him through the bond constantly. A presence humming beneath her skin, warm and persistent, and impossible to ignore. It was maddening, comforting, terrifying. She'd spent 27 years feeling invisible, and now she couldn't escape the sensation of being seen so completely it felt like exposure. The landscape transformed as they traveled. The struggling borderlands gave way to prosperous farmlands where wolves worked fields that actually produced abundant crops. Then rolling hills dotted with thriving villages where children played without the haunted wariness Vesper associated with poverty. And finally, the mountains themselves, ancient, imposing, beautiful in their harsh grandeur. It's different here, Vesper said quietly to Kieran on the second day. The territories near Thornhaven are dying. But this is what proper leadership looks like. Kieran's tone was matter-of-fact. Orion has spent 20 years building infrastructure, establishing trade routes, ensuring even the smallest packs have access to resources. The borderlands suffer because alphas like Darius prioritize personal profit over their people's welfare. Is that why he went undercover? To see how bad it had gotten.
Partially.
But also because appearing as a king means everyone performs for you. They hide problems, present carefully constructed lies. Going as nobody meant people spoke freely around him, meant he could see the truth. Kieran glanced at her, including the truth about how Thornhaven treated you. Vesper's hands tightened on her reins. That doesn't excuse the deception. No, Kieran agreed. But perhaps it explains it. They rode in silence after that, and Vesper tried not to think about Orion watching her struggle with water buckets while wearing a disguise. Tried not to wonder how much of their courtship had been genuine versus calculated. Tried not to acknowledge that her traitorous heart already knew the answer. Moon's car palace came into view on the afternoon of the third day, and Vesper's breath caught. It wasn't a single building, but a sprawling complex carved into the mountainside itself. Towers reached toward the sky like stone fingers, their surfaces gleaming with some mineral that caught sunlight and transformed it into rainbow prisms. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliffs on either side, their mist creating halos of light. And the whole structure seemed to pulse with ancient power, as if the mountain itself had been convinced to become architecture. It's impossible, Vesper whispered. It's home, Kieran replied. And now it's yours too. The gates were massive, easily 30 feet tall, carved from some dark wood that looked like it had been growing there since the dawn of time. Guards in silver-crested armor stood at attention as the procession approached, and when they recognized Kieran, they immediately dropped to one knee. Beta Kieran. The king sent word you were bringing the Luna Queen. The captain, a scarred female with kind eyes, looked past him to Vesper. Your Majesty, welcome home. I'm not. Vesper started, then stopped. What was she? Not a queen, not yet, but apparently not just Vesper Thorn anymore either. Thank you. They passed through the gates into a courtyard so massive it could have held all of Thornhaven twice over. And it was filled with people. Hundreds of wolves stood in organized rows, all dressed in formal livery, all waiting. When Vesper's horse entered the courtyard, every single one of them dropped to one knee in synchronized precision that looked choreographed. Your Majesty, they said in unison. Welcome home. Vesper felt tears prick her eyes. Welcome home. Words her own family had never spoken, now offered by hundreds of strangers who owed her nothing but duty. Kieran helped her dismount, and immediately an older woman in elegant robes appeared, curtsying deeply. Your Majesty, I am Lady Marin, head of the household staff. We've prepared chambers for you in Luna's tower. If you follow me, we can get you settled while the king addresses the council. The king, Orion, where is he? Already in meetings, Your Majesty. The conspiracy required immediate attention. Lady Marin's expression was sympathetic, but he left specific instructions that you were to be given anything you needed and not overwhelmed with obligations until you were ready. Some escaped. Most didn't. His expression was grim. But we have enough evidence and captured conspirators to prevent this from spreading further. The mission is complete. So what happens now? The question carried weight beyond its simple words, and Orion understood immediately. Now I will take you home, to Moon's car palace. Introduce you to the council as my mate and Luna Queen. Give you time to adjust your new life while I handle the political fallout. He paused. If that's what you want, and if it's not. Pain flashed across his features. Then I'll find you a cottage somewhere safe, provide everything you need, and visit as often as you'll allow while we figure out if this can be repaired. You do that? Even though I'm your mate? Vesper. His hands finally reached for her, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. I would rather spend eternity earning your forgiveness than force you into a life you don't want. The mate bond makes us compatible, but love, real love, is a choice you make every day. I chose you in Thornhaven. Now you get to choose me back. Or not. The bond screamed at her to accept, to close the distance, to complete the connection that was tearing them both apart with its incompleteness. But Vesper's wounded heart needed more than instinct. "I need time," she whispered, "to process this, to understand what it means, to figure out if I can forgive the lies. Then you'll have it." Orion pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle, reverent, goodbye-shaped. "As much time as you need." He stepped back, and the loss of contact made her gasp. "Kieran will take you to Moon's car. You'll have private chambers, staff to attend you, protection beyond measure. The council will want to meet you, but I'll hold them off until you're ready." His voice was steady despite the devastation in his eyes. "And Vesper, I love you." That was never a lie. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in a clearing surrounded by guards who called her queen, carrying a bond that felt like barbed wire wrapped around her heart, and wondering how something that should have been destiny's gift had become the most complicated thing she'd ever faced. Chapter 8. The Palace of Wolves. The journey to Moon's Car Palace took 3 days, and Vesper spent most of it in a daze. Kieran led the procession with military precision, 50 royal guards surrounding her like she was something precious and breakable, which she supposed she was. The newly bonded maid of a king, still reeling from revelations that had shattered her understanding of reality. Orion rode ahead with a smaller contingent, handling the captured conspirators and coordinating with other territories. He kept his distance, true to his word about giving her time, but Vesper felt him through the bond constantly. A presence humming beneath her skin, warm and persistent, and impossible to ignore. It was maddening, comforting, terrifying. She'd spent 27 years feeling invisible, and now she couldn't escape the sensation of being seen so completely it felt like exposure. The landscape transformed as they traveled. The struggling borderlands gave way to prosperous farmlands where wolves worked fields that actually produced abundant crops. Then rolling hills dotted with thriving villages where children played without the haunted wariness Vesper associated with poverty. And finally, the mountains themselves, ancient, imposing, beautiful in their harsh grandeur. "It's different here," Vesper said quietly to Kieran on the second day. "The territories near Thornhaven are dying. But this is what proper leadership looks like." Kieran's tone was matter-of-fact. Orion has spent 20 years building infrastructure, establishing trade routes, ensuring even the smallest packs have access to resources. The borderlands suffer because alphas like Darius prioritize personal profit over their people's welfare. Is that why he went undercover? To see how bad it had gotten?
Partially.
But also because appearing as a king means everyone performs for you. They hide problems, present carefully constructed lies. Going as nobody meant people spoke freely around him, meant he could see the truth. Kieran glanced at her, including the truth about how Thornhaven treated you. Vesper's hands tightened on her reins. That doesn't excuse the deception. No, Kieran agreed. But perhaps it explains it. They rode in silence after that, and Vesper tried not to think about Orion watching her struggle with water buckets while wearing a disguise. Tried not to wonder how much of their courtship had been genuine versus calculated. Tried not to acknowledge that her traitorous heart already knew the answer. Moon's Car Palace came into view on the afternoon of the third day, and Vesper's breath caught. It wasn't a single building, but a sprawling complex carved into the mountainside itself. Towers reached toward the sky like stone fingers, their surfaces gleaming with some mineral that caught sunlight and transformed it into rainbow prisms. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliffs on either side, their mist creating halos of light. And the whole structure seemed to pulse with ancient power, as if the mountain itself had been convinced to become architecture. "It's impossible," Vesper whispered. "It's home," Kieran replied. "And now it's yours too." The gates were massive, easily 30 feet tall, carved from some dark wood that looked like it had been growing there since the dawn of time. Guards in silver-crested armor stood at attention as the procession approached, and when they recognized Kieran, they immediately dropped to one knee. "Beta Kieran. The king sent word you were bringing the Luna Queen." The captain, a scarred female with kind eyes, looked past him to Vesper. "Your Majesty, welcome home." "I'm not." Vesper started, then stopped. What was she? Not a queen, not yet, but apparently not just Vesper Thorn anymore either. Thank you. They passed through the gates into a courtyard so massive it could have held all of Thornhaven twice over. And it was filled with people. Hundreds of wolves stood in organized rows, all dressed in formal livery, all waiting. When Vesper's horse entered the courtyard, every single one of them dropped to one knee in synchronized precision that looked choreographed. Your Majesty, they said in unison. Welcome home. Vesper felt tears prick her eyes. Welcome home. Words her own family had never spoken, now offered by hundreds of strangers who owed her nothing but duty. Kieran helped her dismount, and immediately an older woman in elegant robes appeared, curtsying deeply. Your Majesty, I am Lady Marin, head of the household staff. We've prepared chambers for you in Luna's tower. If you follow me, we can get you settled while the king addresses the council. The king, Orion, where is he? Already in meetings, Your Majesty. The conspiracy required immediate attention. Lady Marin's expression was sympathetic, but he left specific instructions that you were to be given anything you needed and not overwhelmed with obligations until you were ready. Because of course he did. Because even while giving her space, he was still protecting her. Vesper followed Lady Marin through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The palace was a maze of polished stone and soaring ceilings, of tapestries that depicted battles she didn't recognize and portraits of wolves whose power seemed to radiate from the canvas itself. This is Luna's tower, Lady Marin explained as they climbed a spiraling staircase. It's been empty for as long as I've worked here. King Orion never took a mate before you. 42 years, Vesper said quietly. That's a long time to be alone. Indeed, Your Majesty. Which is why your arrival has caused such excitement throughout the palace. The king has finally found his mate. They reached a set of double doors carved with images of wolves running beneath a full moon. Lady Marin pushed them open, and Vesper stepped into chambers that stole her breath. The space was enormous, larger than her entire cottage in Thornhaven. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the mountain range, and she could see for miles. The furniture was elegant but comfortable, clearly crafted by masters. Fresh flowers filled vases on every surface, and a fire crackled in a fireplace big enough to stand in. But what caught Vesper's attention was the bookshelf. An entire wall of books, more than she'd seen in her entire life, carefully organized and waiting. The king had them brought in, Lady Marin said softly, noticing Vesper's fixation. He remembered you mentioning you loved to read, but rarely had time. He thought perhaps here you might. Something cracked in Vesper's chest. Even while lying about everything else, Orion had been paying attention to small details, had been collecting pieces of who she was and carefully incorporating them into the life he was building for them. There's a bathing chamber through that door, Lady Marin continued, gesturing. And your wardrobe has been stocked with clothing in your size, though we'll need proper measurements for formal gowns. The council will want to meet you eventually, but the king insisted you have at least a week to adjust before any official obligations. A week. Vesper turned from the bookshelf. What happens after a week? The formal coronation, Your Majesty, where you'll be presented to the kingdom as Luna Queen. Lady Marin's expression was gentle, but that's a concern for later. For now, would you like a bath? Some food? Time to rest? All of it, Vesper admitted. And maybe some answers about what being Luna Queen actually means? Of course. I'll have refreshments sent up, and I'm at your disposal for any questions. Lady Marin courtside again. Welcome home, Your Majesty. Truly. After the household had left, Vesper stood alone in chambers fit for royalty and tried to process the enormity of what her life had become. 24 hours ago, she'd been kneeling in dirt while her mother destroyed her publicly. Now she stood in a palace carved from mountains, surrounded by luxury beyond imagination, addressed as royalty by people who had no idea who she really was. The imposter syndrome was overwhelming. She bathed in water that stayed magically hot, dressed in clothes softer than anything she'd ever touched, and ate food that tasted like it had been prepared by people who understood that meals could be art. Then she stood at the windows and watched the sun set over mountains she'd never known existed, and felt the mate bond hum with awareness that Orion was somewhere in this massive palace, close enough to reach, but respecting the distance she'd requested. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Enter," she called, expecting Lady Marin. Instead, Orion stepped through the doorway and stopped, his pale eyes finding hers across the room with magnetic force. He'd changed from his blood-stained traveling clothes into formal attire, dark leather and fine wool, the silver wolf crest embroidered over his heart. His hair was pulled back neatly, and he looked every inch the king she was still struggling to reconcile with the man who'd fixed her roof. "I know I said I'd give you space," he said quietly. "But the council insisted on meeting you tomorrow, and I wanted to prepare you before they descend like a pack of well-meaning wolves with terrible timing." "Tomorrow?" Panic fluttered in Vesper's chest. "But Lady Marin said I had a week. I told her to tell you, that's so you wouldn't spend tonight worrying." Orion's expression was apologetic. "The truth is, once word spread that I'd returned with my mate, the council demanded immediate audience. I held them off as long as possible, but they're persistent." "What will they ask?" "Everything. Your background, your family, why a king married a common village woman without consulting them first." He moved closer, careful and controlled. "They'll judge you, question whether you're suitable, try to find weaknesses they can exploit for political advantage." "That's supposed to make me feel better?"
No.
"That's supposed to make you angry enough to face them with your spine straight and your head high." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "You've survived 27 years of people telling you you're worthless. You can survive a council of entitled nobles for one afternoon." Despite everything, Vesper felt a smile tug at her lips. "You sound very confident in someone you barely know." "I know the parts that matter." Orion stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance even though the bond was screaming for contact. "I know you're stronger than you believe, braver than they'll expect, and infinitely more qualified to be Luna Queen than anyone they might have chosen for political convenience." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've seen you show kindness to those who deserved cruelty. Because I've watched you carry impossible burdens without complaint. Because you have a moral compass that points true north regardless of who's watching."
His voice softened.
"The council wanted me to marry someone who knew how to play political games. But I don't need more politicians, Vesper. I need someone who will remind me that leadership is about serving people, not controlling them." The words settled over her like a warm blanket, and Vesper felt some of her panic ease. "What if I fail?" The fear escaped before she could stop it. "What if I'm not enough?" "Then you'll learn. The same way I learned when I took the throne at 22, terrified and certain I'd destroy everything my family built." Orion's expression was earnest. "Vesper, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted. Even though myself is a poor village woman with no training, no connections, no." "Stop." The command in his voice made her fall silent. "You're my mate, my chosen Luna, and if the council has a problem with that, they can resign." "You can't just." "I can. I'm the king." His eyes glinted with something fierce. "And one thing you'll learn about me, about us, is that I protect what's mine. Always." The possessiveness should have bothered her. Instead, it sent warmth spiraling through her chest. "I'm still angry with you," she said quietly, "about the lies. I know, and I don't know if I can forgive them. I know that too." He took a careful step forward. "But I'm asking you to let me try to earn that forgiveness. Starting with facing the council together tomorrow. Will you let me stand beside you when they judge us?" Vesper studied his face. This man who'd been two different people, who'd lied about everything except his feelings, who was asking for trust she wasn't sure she could give. But the mate bond hummed between them with certainty, and her wolf had never been wrong about important things. "Yes," she whispered. "But Orion? Don't lie to me again. Ever. Even if you think the truth will hurt. Never again." The vow resonated through the bond like a bell struck. "You have my word." He started to leave, giving her the space she'd requested, but Vesper's voice stopped him. "Stay. Just for a few minutes. Tell me about them, the council members. So, I know what I'm walking into tomorrow." Orion's entire expression transformed into something soft and grateful. He settled into one of the chairs near the fireplace, careful to maintain distance, but close enough that the bond settled slightly. And as the fire crackled and night fell over the mountains, he told her about the 12 council members she'd face tomorrow. Their names, their territories, their personalities, their likely objections to her sudden elevation. Vesper listened and tried not to notice how right it felt, sitting here with him. How natural the conversation flowed. How easily they fell into rhythm despite everything broken between them. Tomorrow she'd face judgment from nobles who would see only the worthless village woman. But tonight, wrapped in firelight and careful distance, Vesper began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was more than Thornhaven had convinced her she was. And maybe the king who'd lied about everything had been telling the truth about the only thing that mattered. Chapter 9. The Obsidian Court. Vesper woke to gentle knocking and soft morning light streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close. "Your Majesty?" Lady Marin's voice carried through the door. "The council meeting is in 2 hours. We should begin preparations." Preparations. As if Vesper were going into battle rather than a simple meeting. Perhaps she was. She allowed herself to be swept into a whirlwind of activity. Lady Marin arrived with 3 other women, seamstresses, she explained, who carried an elaborate gown of deep sapphire silk embroidered with silver wolves. They dressed her with careful efficiency, their hands gentle but professional, treating her like fragile porcelain that might shatter if handled roughly. The gown fit perfectly, which shouldn't have surprised her given Orion's attention to detail, but still did. It transformed her from a village woman into something else, someone elegant, regal, almost unrecognizable. "Your hair, Your Majesty." One of the seamstresses, a young woman named Calla, began working elaborate braids into Vesper's brown locks, weaving in silver threads that caught the light. The traditional style for Luna Queens. It signifies strength and beauty intertwined. Vesper watched her reflection transform in the mirror and barely recognized herself. "There's one more thing," Lady Marin said quietly, producing a small silver circlet adorned with a single sapphire. "Luna's crown. Not the formal coronation crown that comes later, but this marks your status during official proceedings." The circlet was surprisingly light when Lady Marin placed it on her head, but its weight settled into Vesper's consciousness, like an anchor. She looked like a queen now. The question was whether she could act like one. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. "Your Majesty?" Kieran's voice. "The king sent me to escort you to the council chambers." Vesper took a deep breath and nodded to Lady Marin, who opened the door to reveal Kieran in full formal attire, leather armor polished to a shine, the beta's crest prominent on his chest. His expression shifted when he saw her. "You look terrified." "Magnificent." His smile was genuine. "The council won't know what hit them. That's what I'm afraid of." Kieran offered his arm. "The king is already there. He wanted me to remind you that no matter what they say, you have every right to be in that room. You're his mate, his chosen Luna, and anyone who questions that is questioning his judgment." "That's supposed to be reassuring?" "It's supposed to be true." Kieran's voice gentled as they began walking through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. "Vesper, I've served Orion for 15 years. I've seen him face wars, political coups, territorial disputes that should have torn the kingdom apart. And I've never seen him as certain of anything as he is of you. Even though I'm nobody, you're not nobody. You're the woman who survived circumstances that would have broken stronger wolves. Who maintained kindness when the world gave you every reason to be cruel. Who caught the attention of a king who'd spent 42 years waiting for someone worth his devotion." Kieran glanced at her. "The council sees bloodlines and political connections. Orion sees strength. I suggest you show them he's right." They reached massive double doors carved with intricate wolf designs, the entrance to the council chambers. 2 guards stood at attention, and when they saw Vesper, they immediately dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty." "Stand," Vesper heard herself say, voice steadier than she felt. "And thank you." The guards rose and opened the doors, and Vesper stepped into a room that stole her breath. The council chamber was carved from obsidian, black stone polished to mirror shine that reflected torchlight in dancing patterns. A massive table dominated the center, and around it sat 12 wolves whose combined authority seemed to press against the air itself. And at the head of that table, looking every inch the king he was, sat Orion. His pale eyes found hers immediately, and the mate bond flared to life between them with enough force to make her stumble slightly. Kieran steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow, then guided her toward the empty seat beside Orion. Every pair of eyes in the room tracked her movement. Orion stood as she approached, a gesture of respect that made several council members shift uncomfortably, and pulled out her chair himself before resuming his own seat. "Council," his voice carried effortless authority, "I present Vesper Shadowvane, my true mate and your Luna Queen." The silence that followed was heavy enough to suffocate. Finally, an elderly male with a gray beard cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, while we're grateful you've finally taken a mate, we must express concern about the circumstances. A village woman with no noble blood, no political connections, no training in governance, is exactly what this kingdom needs," Orion interrupted smoothly. "Continue that sentence, Lord Garrett, and you'll find yourself explaining why the qualities you just listed as deficiencies are actually her greatest strengths." Lord Garrett's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment. An elegant woman with sharp features spoke next, her voice diplomatic. "Your Majesty, please understand our position. We've spent years presenting suitable candidates for your consideration. Women trained from birth for this role, with connections that could strengthen alliances and bloodlines that would ensure strong heirs. And you've rejected them all in favor of—" She gestured vaguely at Vesper. "Someone we know nothing about. Her name is Vesper." Orion's tone went cold. "And you'll address her directly if you have questions, Lady Marin. She's sitting right here." Lady Marin's gaze shifted to Vesper, assessing and skeptical. "Very well, Lady Vesper." "It's your Majesty," Kieran interrupted quietly but firmly. "She's the Luna Queen. You'll use her proper title." Color rose in Lady Marin's cheeks. "Your Majesty, then. Can you explain to this council what qualifications you possess for ruling a kingdom? What skills do you bring beyond being the king's fated mate?" Every eye turned to Vesper, waiting for her to crumble under scrutiny, waiting for proof that she was exactly as inadequate as they suspected. And for a moment, Vesper felt the old familiar shame rising, the voice of her mother insisting she was worthless, the whispers of Thornhaven reminding her she'd never be enough. But then she felt Orion's hand settle over hers beneath the table. Not controlling, not directing, just present, steady, trusting her to handle this herself. Vesper lifted her chin and met Lady Marin's gaze directly. "You're right," she said quietly, but clearly enough that everyone heard. "I don't have noble blood. I wasn't trained from birth to navigate political intrigue. I can't strengthen alliances through my family connections because my family is destitute and broken." Several council members exchanged glances that screamed, "I told you so." But Vesper continued, her voice strengthening, "I was raised to survive cruelty, to find kindness in harsh places, to see the worth in people others dismiss. And I learned that power without compassion is just tyranny wearing a crown." She looked around the table, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. "You wanted the king to marry someone who knew how to play political games. Someone who could smile while maneuvering for advantage. Someone trained to see people as assets or obstacles rather than individuals who deserve dignity." Her hand turned under Orion's, threading their fingers together above the table where everyone could see. "But I'm not here to replace what you do or claim I know better. I'm here to learn, to serve, and to make sure this kingdom's strength includes taking care of those who can't take care of themselves." The silence was different now, thoughtful instead of dismissive. "Pretty words," Lord Garrett said. "But governance requires more than good intentions. It requires understanding policy, economics, military strategy." "Which I'll learn," Vesper interrupted. "The same way King Orion learned when he took the throne at 22. the same way anyone learns through study, experience, and mistakes that teach better than perfection ever could. And if you fail? Another council member asked. If your lack of training leads to decisions that harm the kingdom, then I'll have an entire council of experienced advisors to guide me. Vesper's tone sharpened slightly. Unless you're suggesting you're unwilling to teach someone who genuinely wants to learn? That seems like a failure on your part, not mine. Orion coughed, and Vesper suspected he was hiding a smile. Lady Marin leaned forward, her expression still skeptical but less hostile. Your Majesty, you speak of compassion and serving those in need. Can you give us an example of how you'd apply those principles to actual governance? Vesper thought for a moment, remembering conversations in Thornhaven. Problems she'd witnessed that no one seemed willing to address. The border territories are dying, she said. Villages like Thornhaven exist in poverty, while central regions prosper. The gap creates resentment, desperation, and conditions where conspiracies like the one the king just dismantled can flourish. She looked at Orion. What if we created a relief program? Send healers, builders, resources to struggling areas, not as charity, but as investment in preventing future instability. That would be expensive, Lord Garrett noted. More expensive than another conspiracy? Vesper countered. More expensive than watching territories collapse until rogues or human hunters exploit the chaos. She has a point, a younger council member said. The Thornhaven incident cost us lives and exposed weaknesses in our border defenses. Proactive investment might be cheaper than reactive damage control. This is exactly what I've been trying to convince you of for 3 years, Orion said dryly. But suddenly when she suggests it, you're willing to listen? She framed it differently, Your Majesty, Lady Marin admitted, as investment rather than charity. That changes the political calculus. Because I understand what it means to receive charity, Vesper said quietly. How it feels to be pitted rather than valued. People don't need sympathy. They need opportunity. They need to know someone sees their worth and is willing to invest in their potential. The room fell silent again, but this time the quality was different. Considering instead of dismissive. Finally, Lord Garrett spoke. Your Majesty, I won't pretend this situation is ideal. You lack the traditional qualifications we expected in a Luna Queen. But, he paused, seeming to struggle with the admission. Perhaps there's more to your position than first appears. Time will tell. Yes, Vesper agreed. It will. The meeting continued for another hour, council members asking questions that ranged from genuine curiosity to thinly veiled tests. Vesper answered as honestly as she could, admitting ignorance when necessary, but never apologizing for her background. By the time Orion finally adjourned the session, Vesper felt wrung out and exhausted. That went better than expected, Kieran murmured as he escorted her from the chamber. They still think I'm inadequate. They think you're unexpected. There's a difference. He smiled slightly. Give them time, and keep speaking truth to power, like you did in there. They're not used to anyone challenging their assumptions. Back in her chambers, Vesper collapsed into a chair and tried to process what had just happened. She'd faced the council, defended herself, possibly even earned a grudging measure of respect from wolves who'd expected her to crumble. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Enter. Orion stepped inside and immediately closed the distance between them, dropping to his knees in front of her chair. You are magnificent, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Watching you face them down, refusing to apologize for who you are, I've never been prouder of anyone. I was terrified. I know. But you did it anyway. His hands came up to cradle her face. That's what courage is, Vesper. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. She should pull away. Should maintain the distance she'd requested. But the mate bond was singing with satisfaction, and she'd earned this moment of comfort after surviving what felt like trial by fire. What happens now? She asked. Now we have 6 days until the formal coronation. 6 days for you to learn what you need to know, to adjust to palace life, to decide if you can forgive me enough to make this work. His thumb traced her cheekbone. 6 days to prove I'm worth the risk you took marrying me. And if I decide you're not? Pain flashed across his features. Then I'll respect your choice, even if it destroys me. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in Vesper's chest. This wasn't the king speaking. This was the man who'd fixed her roof and carried her water and married her under moonlight because he couldn't imagine existing without her. Orion. Yes. Thank you for letting me handle the council myself. For not intervening unless I needed it. You didn't need it. His smile was soft. You never did. You just needed to believe it. He stood to leave, respecting her space, but Vesper's hand caught his wrist. Stay, she whispered. Just for a little while. Tell me about the kingdom I'm supposed to help you rule. The hope that flooded his expression was almost painful to witness. He settled into the chair beside hers, maintaining a careful distance, and began describing Moonskar in detail, its history, its territories, its people. And as his voice washed over her, Vesper realized something profound. She was falling in love with him all over again. Not the wandering laborer she'd married, but the king he'd always been. The question was whether she could forgive him enough to let herself complete the fall. Chapter 10. Learning to Fly. The next 6 days passed in a blur of lessons, meetings, and careful reconstruction of trust. Lady Marin became Vesper's constant companion, teaching her everything a Luna Queen needed to know. Protocol for formal dinners. The proper way to address visiting alphas. The intricate dance of palace politics where every word carried weight beyond its surface meaning. You're doing remarkably well, Lady Marin said on the third day as they reviewed the hierarchies of the 12 territories. Most new Lunists take months to grasp what you've learned in days. I'm motivated, Vesper replied, studying the map spread before them. Failure isn't an option when an entire kingdom is watching for proof you don't belong. Your Majesty, if I may speak freely? Vesper nodded. You already belong. The king claimed you as his mate. That's the only qualification that truly matters. Lady Marin's expression softened. Everything else, the politics, the protocol, the posturing, those are just tools. You're learning to use them, but they don't define your worth. The words settled over Vesper like a warm blanket, and she found herself blinking back unexpected tears. Thank you, she whispered. I needed to hear that. In the afternoons, Orion would appear, always respectful of her space, always asking permission before entering her chambers, and they'd talk. About the kingdom, about his years ruling alone, about the conspiracy he'd dismantled, and the political fallout still unfolding. He never pushed for physical intimacy beyond holding her hand. Never demanded the mate bond be completed despite the way it hummed between them with increasing urgency. He simply existed in her space with patient devotion, answering every question honestly no matter how uncomfortable. Tell me about the collar, Vesper asked on the fourth evening. They sat by the fireplace, close enough that the bond settled, but far enough that she didn't feel pressured. What exactly did it do? It's ancient magic, iron enchanted to suppress an alpha's essence. Block scent, aura, everything that would identify me as royalty or allow mate recognition. Orion's jaw tightened. It also hurts. Constantly. Like wearing a chain of ice around your neck that never warms. You wore it for months? 3 months in the territories. Another month before that while establishing my cover story. He met her eyes. It was necessary for the mission, but I won't pretend it wasn't also convenient. It gave me time with you before the bond could snap into place and force your recognition. You wanted to choose me freely, Vesper said quietly, understanding finally settling into place. But you also wanted me to choose you the same way. Yes. His admission was raw. I'd watched too many wolves made out of obligation, watching them resent bonds that felt like chains rather than choices. I didn't want that for us. So, you lied to protect my ability to choose? I lied because I was selfish. Orion's voice was steady despite the pain in it. Because I wanted you to love me before you had to accept me. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Vesper. If I could go back. You'd do it again, she interrupted. Because the alternative was revealing yourself immediately and never knowing if my feelings were genuine or just the bond speaking. He nodded slowly. Does that make it forgivable?
Vesper thought about it.
Really thought, not just reacting from hurt, but analyzing the impossible position he'd been in. I don't know yet, she admitted. But I'm starting to understand why you made the choices you did. Even if I hate that you felt you had to make them. That's more than I deserve. Maybe. She shifted slightly closer, and the bond sang with approval. But you're trying to earn it. That counts for something. On the 5th day, Vesper made a decision. She found Kieran in the training yard, watching guards run through combat drills, and asked him to teach her self-defense. Your Majesty? His surprise was evident. Do you want combat training? I want to never feel helpless again. Vesper's voice was firm. I spent 27 years being told I was weak, that I needed protection, that I couldn't defend myself. I'm done believing that. Kieran's expression transformed into something fierce and proud. When do we start?
Now.
He worked her hard, teaching her basic strikes, defensive positions, how to use an opponent's weight against them. Vesper discovered muscles she didn't know she possessed, and by the end of the session, she was bruised, exhausted, and exhilarated. You're a natural, Kieran noted as they finished. Your instincts are good. With proper training, you could be formidable. I don't need to be formidable. I just need to be capable. In this world, Your Majesty, those are the same thing. Orion found her that evening, soaking in a hot bath to ease muscles screaming from unaccustomed exertion. He knocked, waited for permission, and entered to find her neck deep in steaming water. Kieran tells me you're training, he said, settling onto the edge of the massive tub with careful distance. Is that a problem? It's brilliant. His smile was genuine. I should have offered it myself, but I didn't want to presume. You're already so strong. I sometimes forget you might want tools to express that strength. I'm tired of being protected, Vesper said quietly. I want to be someone who can stand beside you, not behind you. You already are. Orion's voice was intense. Vesper, you faced down a hostile council and earned their respect through words alone. That's a kind of strength most warriors never develop. Words won't help if someone attacks me.
No.
But Kieran will teach you what you need to defend yourself physically. He paused. Just promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. The thought of you in danger, it makes me insane. The mate bond makes it worse. But it's not just that. It's you. It's knowing the world tried to break you for 27 years and almost succeeded. It's terrifying that now that I've found you, something will take you away. The vulnerability in his admission cracked through Vesper's remaining defenses. Orion, she said softly, I'm not going anywhere. His eyes closed briefly, relief washing over his features. Promise me. I promise. Even if you decide you can't forgive me, even if this doesn't work out the way we hoped, even then. Vesper's voice was steady. You're my mate. That doesn't disappear just because we're navigating complicated emotions. We're bound together, for better or worse, and I'm done running from difficult things. When he opened his eyes again, they shimmered with unshed tears. I don't deserve you. Probably not. Her lips quivered slightly. But you're stuck with me anyway. He laughed. Actual, genuine laughter, and the sound filled something in Vesper's chest she hadn't realized was empty. Can I ask you something? She ventured. Anything. The night we handfasted, I felt the bond trying to snap into place. But it hit some kind of wall. That was the collar?
Yes.
It blocked the full connection until I removed it. Orion's expression was pained. You have no idea how difficult it was, being that close to you, feeling the bond screaming to complete itself, and knowing I was the one preventing it. Why not just take it off then? After we married? Because once the bond snapped into place, you'd know everything. What I was. What you'd become by marrying me. And I wanted, he swallowed hard. I want a few more days of just being Orion and Vesper, before the weight of crowns and kingdoms complicated everything. Selfish, Vesper noted. Unforgivably so. But human. She shifted in the water, and his eyes carefully stayed on her face. You spent 42 years being a king. I think you're allowed a few weeks of being just a man. Even if it meant lying to you? Even then. Vesper took a breath, gathering courage. Orion, I'm not saying what you did was right. It wasn't. And part of me is still hurt by it. But I'm starting to understand that you weren't trying to manipulate me. You were trying to give us both something real before duty claimed it. Does that mean? It means I'm choosing to forgive you. The words emerged steady despite her pounding heart. Not because the bond demands it, but because I want to. Because holding on to anger is exhausting, and I'd rather spend that energy building something with you. The hope that flooded his expression was almost painful to witness. Vesper. But, she interrupted firmly, if you ever lie to me again about anything, for any reason, we're done. Bond or no bond, I won't stay with someone I can't trust. Do you understand? Completely. His voice was rough with emotion. And I swear on everything I am, everything I rule, I will never lie to you again. Even if the truth is uncomfortable or complicated or dangerous. You'll always have it. Then come here. He moved without hesitation, kneeling beside the tub, and Vesper reached out with wet hands to cup his face. I love you, she said simply. Not the king. Not the title or the power or the palace. Just you. The man who saw worth in me when no one else bothered to look. I love you too. His forehead pressed against hers. More than I have words for. More than I thought I was capable of. Show me. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and devastating. The mate bond flared to life between them with renewed intensity, and Vesper felt it pulling, demanding, insisting they complete what had been started under that blood moon. Not here, she murmured against his lips. Properly. In bed. Without an audience of servants who might interrupt. Orion pulled back, his pale eyes dark with desire. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He stood and offered his hand. Vesper took it, rising from the bath without shame or hesitation, and let him wrap her in the softest towel she'd ever felt. Then he lifted her into his arms, effortless, gentle, and carried her through the connecting door to his own chambers. They made love slowly, thoroughly, with the desperation of two people who'd been denying themselves for too long. And when the bond finally, completely snapped into place, when Vesper felt Orion's emotions flood through her consciousness like coming home, she understood what she'd been missing. This wasn't just a physical connection. This was souls recognizing each other. This was destiny claiming what had always belonged together. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with their legs tangled and their hearts beating in synchronized rhythm, Vesper felt peace settle over her for the first time since learning the truth. Tomorrow is the coronation, Orion murmured into her hair. Are you ready?
No.
But I'll do it anyway. That's my queen. His arms tightened around her, brave even when terrified. I learned from the best. Flattery will get you everywhere. Good to know. Vesper smiled against his chest. Because I plan to use it extensively. He laughed, and the sound vibrated through her, and Vesper realized something profound. She was happy. Despite everything, the lies, the revelations, the impossible transformation from worthless daughter to Luna Queen, she was genuinely, deeply happy. And tomorrow, when she stood before the kingdom and accepted a crown she'd never imagined wearing, she'd do it not because destiny demanded it, but because she'd chosen it. I chose him, chosen herself, and that made all the difference. Chapter 11. Crown of Moonlight. The morning of the coronation arrived with crystalline sunlight and Vesper's stomach in knots. She woke wrapped in Orion's arms, the mate bond humming contentedly between them, and for a moment allowed herself to simply exist in this pocket of peace before the storm. Good morning, my queen, Orion murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Not yet. Vesper pressed closer to his warmth. For a few more minutes. I'm just Vesper. You'll always be just Vesper to me. His lips found her temple. The crown doesn't change who you are. It just makes visible what was always true. That I'm terrified of failing? That you're capable of extraordinary things when given the opportunity. He shifted to look at her properly. Today, the entire kingdom will see what I saw the moment I met you. Someone worth following. You're biased. Absolutely. His smile was crooked. But that doesn't make me wrong. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Lady Marin's voice carried through the wood, carefully respectful. Your Majesties, we must begin preparations. The ceremony starts in 4 hours. 4 hours until Vesper's life changed irrevocably. 4 hours until she became Luna Queen in the eyes of not just the palace, but the entire kingdom. 4 hours to convince herself she was capable of this. We'll be right there, Orion called, then turned back to Vesper. Whatever happens today, remember, you're not alone. I'll be beside you through every moment. Promise. On my life, on my crown, on everything we've built together. He kissed her softly. You've got this. The preparation was elaborate beyond anything Vesper had imagined. Lady Marin arrived with an entourage of attendants carrying the formal coronation gown, a masterpiece of silver and sapphire that seemed to capture moonlight itself. The fabric shimmered with each movement, and delicate wolf designs were embroidered across the bodice in thread that appeared almost luminescent. This has been in the royal collection for 3 centuries, Lady Marin explained as they carefully dressed Vesper. Every Luna Queen has worn it during her coronation. It's tradition. The weight of that history settled onto Vesper's shoulders along with the gown itself. They painted her face with subtle cosmetics that enhanced rather than concealed, braided her hair into an elaborate crown with silver chains woven through, and finally placed a temporary circlet on her head, simple compared to what would come later, but elegant nonetheless. When Vesper finally looked at her reflection, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the exhausted village woman with rope-burned hands and defeated eyes. In her place stood someone who looked like she belonged in a palace. Someone who could command respect. Someone who might actually be worthy of a crown. You're beautiful, Your Majesty, Calla breathed. I look like someone else. You look like yourself, Lady Marin corrected gently. Just finally dressed in a way that matches who you've always been inside. A different knock, Kieran's distinctive pattern. Your Majesty? The procession is forming. Are you ready? Ready? Vesper would never be ready. But she'd learned over the past week that readiness was overrated compared to courage. Yes, she called. I'm coming. Lady Marin made one final adjustment to Vesper's gown, then stepped back with a satisfied expression. Perfect. Now remember, walk slowly, keep your head high, and let them see your strength. You've earned this crown, Your Majesty. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. Vesper stepped into the corridor to find Kieran waiting in full ceremonial armor, and beside him, Orion. He wore formal regalia that transformed him from the man she'd married into something almost otherworldly. Black leather and silver embroidery, a cloak that seemed to absorb light, and a crown of silver and sapphires that matched her circlet. He looked every inch the ancient king he was. But when his eyes found hers, they held the same warmth she'd seen in the forest weeks ago. The same devotion. The same certainty. You take my breath away, he said simply. You're not so bad yourself. His smile was brief, but genuine. Then he offered his arm in a formal gesture. Shall we show the kingdom their Luna Queen? Let's get this over with before I lose my nerve. They walked through corridors filled with palace staff who dropped into deep bows as they passed. Through courtyards where guards saluted with fists over hearts. Through gates that opened onto the massive ceremonial plaza where thousands of wolves had gathered. The crowd's roar when they emerged was deafening. Vesper's steps faltered, but Orion's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, steadying her. Breathe, he murmured. They're not here to judge you. They're here to celebrate. How can you be sure? Because I know my people. They've waited decades for this moment. They're not going to waste it on cruelty. The ceremonial stage had been erected in the plaza center, an elevated platform where everyone could witness the coronation. The 12 council members stood in formation, and behind them, representatives from every territory in the kingdom. As Vesper and Orion climbed the steps, she scanned the crowd and felt her heart stutter. There, near the edge, familiar faces from Thornhaven. Her father, Ronan, looked older and more worn than she remembered. Sable and Astrid with their husbands, expressions caught between awe and something that looked almost like envy. And her mother. Malice stood apart from the others, her face a mask of complicated emotions Vesper couldn't quite decipher.
Shock.
Regret. Something that might have been pride buried beneath years of bitterness. Their eyes met across the distance, and Vesper felt nothing. No anger. No hurt. No desperate need for approval or acknowledgement. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd transcended everything they'd tried to make her believe about herself. She turned away, focusing on the ceremony beginning around her. Lord Garrett stepped forward, carrying a velvet cushion upon which rested the true Luna crown, an intricate masterpiece of silver and moonstone that seemed to glow with inner light. People of Moon's-Car, his voice carried across the plaza with surprising strength. We gather today to witness the coronation of Vesper Shadowvane as Luna Queen. A woman chosen not through political arrangement or careful negotiation, but through the ancient tradition of mate bonds, destiny itself declaring her worthy to stand beside our king. He turned to Vesper, and she saw grudging respect in his expression. Your Majesty, you come to us from humble origins. You lack the traditional qualifications we expected in a Luna Queen. But over these past days, you've demonstrated something far more valuable, genuine care for those who cannot care for themselves. The wisdom to know when to listen before speaking. And the courage to stand before this council and declare that compassion is not weakness, but strength. He lifted the crown from its cushion. Do you, Vesper Shadowvane, swear to serve this kingdom with honor? To protect its people as you would your own family? To rule with justice tempered by mercy? To stand beside your king not as ornament, but as an equal partner in all things? Vesper's voice emerged clear and steady. I do. Do you swear to use your position not for personal gain, but for the betterment of all wolves within these territories? To remember those without power or voice? To ensure that strength serves rather than dominates? I do. Then by the authority granted to me as head of the Obsidian Council, and with the blessing of King Orion Shadowvane, I crown you. Lord Garrett placed the Luna crown upon Vesper's head, and the moment it settled, something extraordinary happened. The crown blazed with light, brilliant silver that seemed to pour from the moonstones themselves. The glow spread down through Vesper's hair, across her gown, until she seemed to radiate illumination. The crowd gasped collectively. What's happening? Vesper whispered to Orion, fighting the urge to touch the glowing crown. The crown recognizes you. His voice was filled with awe. It's ancient magic. It only responds to those truly worthy of wearing it. In 3 centuries, it's never done this. Luna, Queen of Moon's-Car. Lord Garrett finished, and his expression had transformed from grudging respect to genuine amazement. The crowd erupted. Not polite applause, but genuine celebration, cheers and howls that shook the very air. Orion took Vesper's hand and raised it high, presenting her to the kingdom. Your Luna Queen, he called, his voice carrying with preternatural strength. Chosen by destiny, crowned by magic, and beloved by your king. More cheers, so loud Vesper could feel them vibrating in her bones. Then Orion did something unexpected. He turned to face her fully and dropped to one knee. The plaza fell silent. You don't kneel for anyone, he said, echoing the words he'd spoken in Thornhaven's forest. But I kneel for you. Not because duty demands it, but because you've earned my devotion in ways that transcend crowns or kingdoms. Orion, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His eyes held hers with intensity that stole her breath. You thought you were worthless. Your family convinced you that you had nothing to offer. The village treated you like a burden to be endured rather than a person to be valued. But they were wrong, Vesper. They were all catastrophically wrong. He stood, still holding her hand, and addressed the crowd once more. This woman survived circumstances that would have destroyed weaker wolves. She maintained kindness when the world gave her every reason to be cruel. She chose hope over bitterness, courage over safety, love over self-protection. And now she stands before you wearing a crown that recognizes true worth, not bloodlines or politics or careful calculation, but genuine strength of character. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. So let me make something absolutely clear. Orion's voice carried steel beneath the warmth. Anyone who questions her right to wear this crown is questioning destiny itself. Anyone who dismisses her based on her origins is revealing their own inability to recognize value when it stands before them. And anyone who treats her with anything less than the utmost respect will answer to me personally. He turned back to Vesper, his expression softening. You are my mate, my Luna, my queen, and I am yours now and always. This crown doesn't make you worthy. You always were. It just makes visible what I've known since the moment I saw you. Vesper felt tears slip down her cheeks. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears. Tears of release from 27 years of believing she wasn't enough. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. He pulled her close despite watching thousands. And I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving you made the right choice. You already have. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and devastatingly public, and the crowd erupted once more into celebration. When they finally broke apart, Vesper looked out at the sea of faces and saw acceptance. Celebration.
Hope.
But her eyes found the Thornhaven contingent one last time. Ronan was crying openly, his hand over his heart. Sable and Astrid looked stunned, whispering to each other. And Malice. Her mother stood frozen, watching her daughter wear a crown that glowed with ancient magic, surrounded by thousands who celebrated rather than condemned, claimed by a king who'd chosen her above all others. The karma was complete. Not through revenge or punishment, but through Vesper simply becoming everything they'd convinced her she could never be. The ceremony concluded with oaths from representatives of all 12 territories, pledging loyalty to their new Luna Queen. Then the formal procession back to the palace, where a feast had been prepared for thousands. As they walked through corridors now lined with celebrating wolves, Orion leaned close to murmur in her ear. How do you feel? Like I'm flying and falling simultaneously. Good. His smile was soft. That means you're alive. Fully, completely alive. Is it always this overwhelming? The first coronation? Yes. But it gets easier.
He paused.
Though I suspect you'll make this role your own rather than simply filling it. You've never been good at following other people's expectations. Is that a compliment? It's an observation that happens to be one of the things I love most about you. The feast was magnificent. Tables laden with food Vesper had never imagined existed, entertainment by performers from across the kingdom, toasts offered by wolves whose names she was still learning. But the moment that mattered most came hours later, after the formal celebrations had ended, and Vesper stood on a balcony overlooking the kingdom spread below. Orion joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. What are you thinking? He asked quietly. That time last week, I was in Thornhaven believing I was worthless. And now I'm wearing a crown that literally glows to prove I'm not. The crown doesn't prove anything. You did that yourself. With your help. With your strength. He kissed her temple. I just gave you the opportunity to show what was always there. Vesper turned in his arms to face him properly. What happens now? After the coronation, after the celebration, what does being Luna Queen actually mean? It means working beside me to rule this kingdom. It means implementing those relief programs you suggested for the border territories. It means standing in council meetings and reminding everyone that governance should serve people, not control them. His expression was tender. It means becoming the queen I always needed, but never thought I'd find. No pressure. All the pressure in the world. His smile was crooked. But I believe you can handle it. More than that, I believe you'll transform this role into something better than it's ever been. And if I fail, then we'll fail together and figure out how to succeed next time. His forehead pressed against hers. Vesper, you're not alone in this. You never have to be alone again. The promise settled into her bones like an oath. She was Vesper Shadowvane now. Luna Queen of Moonscar. Wife to a king. Mate chosen by destiny. But more importantly, she was herself, no longer defined by other people's limitations or cruelty. No longer convinced she was worthless. Just Vesper. Finally, fully, completely herself. And that was the greatest crown of all. Chapter 12. The Borders and Bridges. 3 months after her coronation, Vesper stood in the Obsidian Council chamber and presented her first major initiative as Luna Queen. The Border Relief Program, she announced, gesturing to the detailed maps and reports spread across the table. 20 villages in critical need of immediate assistance. I propose we send teams of healers, builders, and agricultural experts to each location, funded directly from the Royal Treasury. Lord Garrett frowned, studying the numbers. Your Majesty, this is expensive. The Treasury can afford it, but the Council traditionally prefers more conservative spending. The Council also traditionally ignored border territories until they became security threats, Vesper replied smoothly. She'd learned over 3 months how to navigate these conversations, firm but diplomatic, never apologizing for her convictions. We can spend resources now preventing crises, or spend far more later managing them. Which seems more conservative to you? A younger council member, Lady Thorne, no relation to Vesper's family, leaned forward with interest. You've identified specific villages? With specific needs? 20 villages, yes. But I've prioritized 5 for immediate intervention based on severity. Vesper pulled forward a separate document. Thornhaven among them. The room went quiet. Everyone knew Vesper's history with her home village. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Lord Garrett asked carefully. Directing royal resources to your family's territory? It would be if I were doing it for personal reasons. Vesper met his gaze directly. But Thornhaven's situation is objectively dire. The village has lost 30% of its population in the last 5 years due to poverty and lack of opportunity. The remaining wolves are one bad harvest away from total collapse. And its location makes it strategically vulnerable to the exact kind of rogue activity we just spent months dismantling. She slid a report across the table. These are the metrics. Judge for yourself whether intervention is warranted. Lord Garrett reviewed the numbers, and his expression shifted. This is worse than I thought. Because no one was paying attention, Vesper said quietly. No one cared what happened to small border villages as long as they didn't cause problems. But ignoring suffering doesn't make it disappear. It just ensures it eventually explodes into something everyone has to deal with. Orion, who'd been silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. The Luna Queen makes a compelling case. I support the initiative fully. Council, voice your objections now or vote to approve. The vote was unanimous, though Vesper suspected Lord Garrett's approval was more about the solid evidence than enthusiasm for her vision. Thank you, she said once the votes were recorded. Implementation begins next week. I'll be traveling to each priority village personally to oversee initial deployment. Your Majesty, Lady Marin looked concerned. Is personal travel necessary? Surely representatives could. Could, but won't. Vesper's tone was gentle but firm. These wolves have been ignored for years. They deserve to know their Luna Queen sees them as worth her time. Besides, I want to understand their needs firsthand rather than filtering everything through reports. I'll accompany you, Orion said immediately, along with a full security detail. Necessary but not excessive, Vesper agreed. I want to be accessible, not intimidating. After the meeting adjourned, Kieran caught up with Vesper in the corridor. That was well played, he noted. You knew Garrett would object to funding your home village, so you led with objective metrics he couldn't argue against. I'm learning. Vesper smiled slightly. Turns out surviving 27 years of manipulation makes you surprisingly good at political strategy. The council doesn't know what to do with you. Kieran's expression was approving. They keep expecting you to be decorative and deferential. Instead, you're reshaping policy. Is that a problem? It's refreshing. He paused. Though I should warn you, returning to Thornhaven won't be easy. You're different now. They're the same. That gap could be uncomfortable. I know. Vesper's voice was quiet. But I need to do this. Need to show them that the daughter they dismissed is now someone who can help them. Not for revenge, but because it's the right thing to do. That's what makes you a good queen, Kieran said. You don't govern from ego. You govern from principle. The journey to Thornhaven took 2 days, and with each mile, Vesper felt old anxieties stirring. What if her family rejected the help because it came from her? What if the village saw her arrival as rubbing her success in their faces? What if? Stop spiraling, Orion murmured from his horse beside hers. The mate bond made her emotional state obvious to him. You're not the same woman who left 3 months ago. They can't hurt you anymore. I know. But knowing and feeling are different things. Then feel it anyway. Let yourself be nervous. But don't let fear stop you from doing what you know is right. They arrived at Thornhaven as the sun began to set, and the village looked even worse than Vesper remembered. More cottages had fallen into disrepair. Fewer wolves moved through the streets. The entire place radiated exhaustion and defeat. The village elder, a male Vesper vaguely recognized, approached cautiously as they dismounted. Your Majesty, he said, dropping into an awkward bow. We received word of your visit. The village is honored by your presence. No need for formality, Elder Marcus. Vesper kept her tone warm. I'm here to help, not to be worshipped. Still, it's not every day a Luna Queen visits Thornhaven. His eyes tracked to Orion with obvious nervousness. Your Majesty, he addressed the king with a deep bow. Elder. Orion's voice carried authority, but not arrogance. We're here to assess needs and deploy resources. Where should we begin? What followed was a comprehensive tour of Thornhaven's struggles. The well that kept breaking. The healer's cottage lacked basic supplies. The school that had closed because no one could afford to pay a teacher. The fields that produced less each year because the soil was depleted and no one knew how to fix it. Vesper took notes, asked questions, and tried to ignore the stares from villagers who couldn't reconcile the worthless daughter with the crowned queen walking their streets. They were setting up camp for the night. Vesper had insisted on staying in the village rather than some distant comfortable location when familiar voices approached. Vesper. She turned to find Sable and Astrid standing at the edge of their campsite, looking uncertain and out of place. Your Majesty, Sable corrected herself quickly. May we speak with you? Vesper glanced at Orion, who nodded once and moved away to give them privacy, while remaining close enough to intervene if needed. What do you want? Vesper kept her tone neutral. To apologize, Astrid said quickly. For everything. For how we treated you. For standing by while Mother destroyed you. For never defending you when you needed it. That's very convenient now that I'm queen. It's not, Sable's voice cracked. It's not about that. We've been watching you. Heard about the things you're doing for border territories. The programs you're implementing.
And we realized.
Realized what? That you were always more than we gave you credit for. Astrid's eyes were shining. We were jealous, Vesper. You were the eldest, and even though everything fell apart, you kept trying. Keep being kind. We resented that because it made our own selfishness obvious. Vesper studied her sisters, women who'd once made her life miserable through casual cruelty and deliberate dismissal. She should feel satisfaction at their belated regret. I should enjoy watching them grovel. Instead, she just felt tired. I appreciate the apology, she said quietly. But I need you to understand, I'm not here to reconcile with a family who only values me now that I have power. I'm here because Thornhaven needs help, and I'm in a position to provide it. We know, Sable whispered, and we're not asking for forgiveness. Just acknowledging that we were wrong. That you deserved better. Yes, I did. Vesper's voice was steady. But I found it anyway. Despite all of you, not because of you. She turned to walk away, then paused. If you want to make amends, don't apologize to me. Apologize to the next person everyone dismisses as worthless. Stand up for them the way you never stood up for me. That's how you earn redemption. Her sisters stood frozen as Vesper returned to Orion's side. That was harder than you expected, he observed quietly. They wanted an absolution I'm not ready to give. Maybe someday, but not today. That's your right. His arm came around her waist. You don't owe anyone forgiveness just because it would make them feel better. The next morning, Ronan appeared. Vesper's father looked older than 3 months should account for, as if releasing the weight of guilt had somehow made him smaller rather than lighter. I won't take much of your time, he said when Vesper agreed to speak with him privately. I just wanted you to know, I left your mother. Vesper blinked in surprise. What? After the coronation. After watching you wear that crown that glowed with magic, proving everything she'd said about you was a lie. Ronan's voice was rough. I couldn't stay with someone who'd spent decades destroying our daughter. So I left. Where is she? With Sable. Your sister took her in, though from what I hear, the relationship is strained. He met Vesper's eyes. I'm not telling you this to earn sympathy. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that your success forced all of us to confront our failures. And some of us are trying to do better, even if it's too late. What will you do now? I don't know. Find work somewhere. Try to rebuild something from the wreckage of my choices. He paused. But I wanted to thank you first. For becoming everything we tried to convince you that you couldn't be. For proving that our limitations weren't yours. I didn't do it to prove anything to you, Vesper said quietly. I did it because someone finally saw my worth and gave me the opportunity to show it. King Orion. Ronan glanced toward where the king stood coordinating with the relief teams. He's a good man. Better than you should have expected after how he treated you. He's my mate. Destiny chose better for me than my family ever did. The observation hung between them, not cruel, just factually true. I'm glad, Ronan said finally. Truly glad you found happiness. Even if we don't deserve to witness it. He left without asking for forgiveness, which Vesper appreciated. Some wounds were too deep for simple apologies to heal. Over the next 3 days, Vesper's relief teams transformed Thornhaven. The well was repaired with new mechanisms that wouldn't break. The healer received supplies and training on treating common ailments more effectively. Agricultural experts taught crop rotation and soil enrichment techniques. Builders reinforced structures on the verge of collapse. And throughout it all, Vesper worked alongside them. Not as a distant queen issuing orders, but as someone who remembered what it felt like to struggle and wanted to ensure others didn't suffer the same way. The village watched with growing amazement as their former pariah demonstrated leadership that came from genuine care rather than political calculation. On the final evening, Elder Marcus organized an informal gathering in the village square. Your Majesty, he said as wolves assembled, we want to thank you. Not just for the resources, but for remembering us. For caring about a small border village that most of the kingdom forgets exists. I could never forget Thornhaven, Vesper replied. For better or worse, it made me who I am. And now I'm in a position to ensure others don't have to suffer the way I did simply because they're poor or isolated or dismissed as worthless. She looked around at the familiar faces, people who'd pitted her, judged her, watched her humiliation without intervening. I'm not here for revenge, she continued. I'm here because every wolf deserves opportunity regardless of their circumstances. Because strength should serve rather than dominate. Because the measure of a kingdom isn't how it treats its powerful, but how it protects its vulnerable. The crowd was silent, absorbing her words. You're all part of Moonskar. You matter. Your struggles matter. And as long as I'm Luna Queen, you won't be forgotten again. The applause started slowly, then built until the entire village was celebrating, not just the resources she brought, but the validation that someone with power actually cared. As they prepared to leave the next morning, Vesper took one final walk through Thornhaven streets. The cottage where she'd grown up looked exactly the same, still shabby, still exhausted, still carrying the weight of painful memories. But it didn't hurt anymore. Looking at it was like studying a place someone else had lived, someone she barely remembered being. Ready? Orion appeared beside her, his hand finding hers naturally. Yes. She squeezed his fingers. There's nothing left for me here. My home is wherever you are now. That's remarkably sentimental for someone who spent 3 months learning to play political games. I contain multitudes. Her smile was genuine. Ruthless policy strategist and hopeless romantic. It's called range. It's called perfect. He kissed her temple. Now, let's go home. We have 18 more villages to visit, and I have a feeling each one is going to make you cry at least once. Only once per village? You underestimate my emotional capacity. Never. His arm came around her waist as they walked toward their waiting horses. I've learned never to underestimate you about anything. As they rode away from Thornhaven, Vesper looked back one final time. The village that had tried to break her was now being rebuilt partly because she'd refused to let its cruelty destroy her capacity for compassion. The family that had dismissed her as worthless now had to witness her transformation into someone who wielded power with grace. The karma was complete, not through revenge, but through becoming exactly who she was always meant to be. And as Thornhaven disappeared behind them, Vesper turned her face forward, toward the kingdom waiting to be served, the mate who'd chosen her above all others, and the future she'd build not despite her painful past, but because it had taught her what truly mattered. She was Vesper Shadowvane, Luna Queen of Moonskar, and she was just getting started. Chapter 13. The Rising Queen. 6 months into her reign, Vesper had become someone even she barely recognized. The nervous village woman who trembled before the council was gone, replaced by a Luna Queen who commanded rooms with quiet authority. She'd visited all 20 priority villages, implemented relief programs that were already showing results, and earned grudging respect even from council members who'd initially dismissed her. But tonight, standing in their private chambers while Orion worked late in his study, Vesper felt the weight of something new pressing against her consciousness. A secret she'd been carrying for 3 weeks. A truth that would change everything. She pressed her hand against her still flat stomach and felt the faint flutter of life growing there, barely perceptible, but undeniable through the mate bond's heightened awareness. She was pregnant. The realization had come during a routine visit to the palace healer for what Vesper assumed was exhaustion from constant travel. Instead, the healer had congratulated her with tears of joy, explaining that the kingdom had waited decades for an heir. Vesper had sworn her to secrecy, needing time to process before telling Orion. Before the news became public property and her body became a matter of political discussion. But 3 weeks of carrying this alone was becoming unbearable. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Vesper? May I come in? Orion. She could hear exhaustion in his voice, another late council session dealing with border disputes. Always, she called. He entered looking worn, shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many responsibilities and not enough sleep. But when he saw her standing by the window, his entire expression softened. You're thinking loudly, he observed, moving to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. What's troubling my queen? The casual endearment made her decision. She couldn't keep this from him any longer. Orion, I need to tell you something. His body went tense immediately, protective instincts flaring. Are you alright? Is someone threatening you? Did something happen during? I'm pregnant. The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water, sending ripples through everything. Orion went completely still. Then his hands moved from her waist to splay across her stomach with devastating gentleness. Pregnant, he repeated, voice rough with emotion. You're certain? The healer confirmed it 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. He turned her to face him, and she saw the hurt flash across his features. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because the moment I do, it stops being ours and becomes the kingdom's. Vesper's voice cracked. The council will have opinions. The nobles will start calculating political implications. Everyone will have expectations about what this means for succession and alliances and... Vesper. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Breathe. She did, pulling air into lungs that felt too tight. Better? At her nod, he continued. Now listen carefully. Yes, the kingdom will care about this. Yes, there will be political implications. But before any of that matters, this is ours. A child we created together. And nothing, no council, no politics, no expectations, changes that fundamental truth. You're not angry I waited? I'm sad you felt you had to carry this alone. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But I understand why. You've spent 6 months learning that everything about you is public property. Of course you wanted to keep something private for a little while. Relief flooded through her so intensely, she felt tears gathering. I've been so scared. Of what? That I won't be a good mother. That I'll repeat the mistakes my mother made. That I'll damage this child the way I was damaged. The confession burst out raw and desperate. What if I don't know how to love them properly? What if I'm too broken? Oh, my love. Orion pulled her close, his hand cradling the back of her head. You're not your mother. You've never been your mother. Everything you've done as Luna Queen, every program you've implemented, every village you've helped, it all comes from a place of genuine compassion. That same compassion will make you an extraordinary mother. How can you be sure? Because I know you. He pulled back enough to look at her properly. I've watched you care for wolves you've never met simply because they needed help. I've seen you show kindness to people who are cruel to you. I've witnessed you break cycles of cruelty through sheer force of will. His voice was gentle. You're going to be the mother you needed but never had. And I'm going to be right beside you, learning how to be a father alongside you learning to be a mother. We're both making this up as we go. Completely. His smile was crooked. But we'll make mistakes together, learn together, and love this child together. That's what matters. Vesper pressed her face against his chest, letting his steady heartbeat calm her racing thoughts. When do we tell everyone? Whenever you're ready.
Tomorrow.
Next week. Next month. This is your news to share on your timeline. The council will want to know immediately. The council can wait. Steel entered his voice. You're not just an air-producing vessel, Vesper. You're my mate, my partner, and you get to decide when you're ready for this to become public knowledge. She pulled back to study his face. You're really happy about this? Happy. His laugh was slightly unsteady. I'm terrified and exhilarated and overwhelmed. I'm 43 years old, Vesper. I'd given up on having children decades ago. And now, his hand returned to her stomach. Now we get to build a family together. So yes, I'm happy. Impossibly, irrationally happy. Even though the timing is complicated? When wouldn't it be complicated? He kissed her softly. We're ruling a kingdom. There's always going to be border disputes or political tensions or crises demanding attention. But life doesn't wait for convenient moments. So we'll handle this the same way we handle everything else together. That night, wrapped in his arms with his hand resting protectively over where their child grew, Vesper felt peace settle over her anxieties. They told the council 1 week later. Vesper had wanted to wait longer, but her morning sickness was becoming difficult to hide, and she refused to let palace gossip spread the news before she controlled the narrative. Council, Orion announced at the beginning of their regular session, the Luna Queen and I have news. We're expecting an heir. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Lord Garrett's face split into a genuine smile for the first time since Vesper had met him. Your Majesty, this is extraordinary news. The kingdom has waited decades. The bloodline will continue, Lady Marin breathed. After 43 years, finally an heir. Other council members erupted into excited conversation, already calculating political implications and succession arrangements. Vesper let them talk for exactly 60 seconds. Then she stood, and something in her posture made the entire room fall silent. I understand this news has political significance, she said quietly but firmly. But I need to establish some boundaries immediately. This child is not public property. They're not a political tool or a bargaining chip. They're a person who deserves to grow up without the weight of everyone's expectations crushing them before they've even taken their first breath. She looked around the table, meeting each council member's eyes. So, here's how this will work. Yes, you'll be informed of developments relevant to succession planning. No, you don't get to dictate how we raise our child. Yes, they'll be trained for leadership. No, they won't be paraded around for political purposes before they're old enough to understand what that means. Her voice sharpened. And anyone who tries to use my pregnancy to manipulate palace politics will find themselves explaining their actions to a Luna queen who's significantly less patient than she was 6 months ago. The silence was absolute. Then Lord Garrett cleared his throat. Your Majesty makes fair points. Perhaps we've gotten ahead of ourselves in our excitement. Perhaps you have. Vesper sat back down. Now, can we return to the actual agenda? I believe we were discussing expansion of the agricultural support program. The meeting continued, but Vesper noticed the subtle shift in how council members addressed her. There was new respect there, not just for her title, but for her willingness to establish boundaries even when those boundaries contradicted political convenience. After the session, Kieran caught up with her in the corridor, his expression approving. That was impressive. You essentially told the entire council to back off without making it sound like an insult. I learned from the best. Vesper smiled slightly. Orion's been teaching me that authority doesn't require cruelty. Sometimes quiet firmness is more effective than shouting. He's not wrong. Though I suspect your instincts would have led you there eventually, anyway. Kieran paused. How are you feeling? Honestly? Terrified. Excited. Overwhelmed. Nauseous at random intervals. She pressed her hand against her stomach unconsciously. But also hopeful? Like maybe this child represents a fresh start. A chance to break cycles and build something better. They'll be lucky to have you as a mother. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm trying to believe it. Believe it. Kieran's voice was gentle. I've known Orion for 15 years. I've seen him interact with children, with families, with wolves raising their young. And I've never seen him as certain of anything as he is that you'll be an extraordinary mother. The pregnancy progressed, and with it came changes Vesper hadn't anticipated. Her powers, dormant for years under the weight of poverty and suppression, began to emerge. The mate's bond with Orion strengthened, allowing them to sense each other's emotions across distances. And the child growing within her seemed to carry its own unique energy, a brightness that both healers and seers noted with fascination. The child is strong, the head healer reported during a routine examination in Vesper's 4th month. Their aura already manifests, which is extremely rare this early. They'll likely be powerful when they mature. Powerful how? Vesper asked, one hand protectively covering her now visible bump. That remains to be seen. But children born to true mates, especially mates as compatible as you and the king, often develop gifts beyond standard wolf abilities. The healer smiled. This child will be extraordinary, Your Majesty. Of that I'm certain. News of the pregnancy spread through the kingdom like wildfire, and with it came an outpouring of support that moved Vesper to tears more than once. Villages sent gifts, hand-carved toys, blessed blankets, promises of protection. The relief programs she'd implemented suddenly had volunteers flooding in, wolves eager to serve a Luna queen who was building the future while carrying it literally within her. But not everyone celebrated. 3 months into her pregnancy, assassination attempt came. Vesper was walking through the palace gardens, one of her few sanctuaries, when an arrow whistled past her head, missing by inches. Before she could even scream, Kieran materialized from nowhere, tackling her to the ground while guards flooded the area. The archer was caught within minutes, a wolf from a noble family who'd opposed Vesper's common origins from the beginning. During interrogation, he confessed to believing the bloodline would be contaminated by her peasant blood, that the child she carried was a threat to the kingdom's purity. Orion's rage was incandescent. Vesper had never seen him so close to losing control. He wanted the assassin executed immediately, publicly, as a warning to anyone else harboring similar ideas. But Vesper stopped him. Execute him privately, she said, her voice steady despite the shaking in her hands. Don't make a spectacle. Don't give his hatred more power by treating it as something worth public attention. He tried to kill you. Orion's voice was barely human. He tried to kill our child. I know. And he'll die for it. But turning his execution into entertainment won't heal whatever sickness in this kingdom makes people think noble blood matters more than character. She took his hand, guiding it to her stomach where their child kicked strongly. Our child will grow up in a kingdom that values worth over birthright. That starts with us modeling mercy even toward those who deserve none. You're stronger than I am, Orion said finally, because I want him to suffer. So do I. Vesper's admission was raw, but I won't let his hatred change who I am. Won't let it transform me into someone who governs through fear and revenge. The assassin was executed quietly. No spectacle. No public announcement. Just justice delivered, and then moved past. But the attempt left scars. Vesper struggled to feel safe in her own home, jumped at shadows, couldn't walk anywhere without half-dozen guards. The joy of pregnancy became tainted by constant fear that someone else might try to harm the child she was growing. I'm afraid, she confessed to Orion one night, wrapped in his arms in their bed. All the time, what if they try again? What if next time they succeed? Then I'll burn the kingdom down finding who sent them. His voice was fierce. But Vesper, you can't live in fear. That's exactly what they want, to make you small again, to make you doubt your right to be here. What if they're right, though? What if my common blood does weaken the royal line? What if? Stop. He shifted to loom over her, his pale eyes blazing. Blood doesn't determine strength. The character does. Choices do. And our child, they'll have the best parts of both of us. Your compassion and my strategic thinking. Your resilience and my authority. Your capacity for growth and my centuries of experience. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Everything else is just noise from people too limited to recognize that worth exists independent of bloodlines. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. You are Luna Queen because destiny chose you. Our child will be extraordinary because they're ours. And anyone who disagrees can take it up with me personally. Despite the fear, despite the attempts to undermine her, Vesper continued her work. She expanded relief programs to 30 additional villages, implemented educational reforms that ensured even the poorest packs had access to learning, established a system where grievances could be brought directly to the Luna Queen without filtering through political hierarchies. And slowly, the kingdom began to transform. Wolves who'd been forgotten found themselves remembered. Villages that had struggled for decades received support that allowed them to thrive. Children who would have grown up believing they had no future discovered opportunities they'd never imagined existed. All because a worthless village woman had become queen and refused to forget where she came from. 7 months into her pregnancy, visibly round and glowing despite exhaustion, Vesper stood before the council and delivered her final initiative before taking leave to prepare for the birth. The Equality Accords, she announced. A formal declaration that worth is determined by character and contribution, not bloodline or origin. No wolf in this kingdom will be dismissed as worthless based on circumstances beyond their control. No child will grow up believing they have no value because they were born poor or common. She looked around the table at faces that had once dismissed her exactly the way she was now fighting to prevent. I know this makes some of you uncomfortable. I know it challenges systems that have existed for centuries.
But those systems failed me.
They failed countless others. And I refuse to let them fail my child or any child born in this kingdom. Lord Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice carrying surprising emotion. Your Majesty, when you first appeared before this council, I thought you were inadequate, unsuitable, a political disaster waiting to happen.
He paused.
I was catastrophically wrong. You've transformed this kingdom in 6 months more than we've changed it in decades. And these equality accords, they're long overdue. Do you support them? I support them. And I formally apologize for ever suggesting you lacked qualifications to be Luna Queen. You've proven that the most important qualification is caring enough to use power for good. The other council members voiced agreement, some enthusiastic, others grudging, but all in support. The equality accords passed unanimously. That evening, standing on the balcony overlooking the kingdom she was reshaping, Vesper felt her child kick strongly against her ribs. She pressed her hand to the spot, smiling. Your mother used to be called worthless, she murmured to the growing life within her. She believed it for 27 years. But then someone saw her value, and everything changed. You're going to grow up in a kingdom where no one has to feel worthless, where every wolf knows they have worth simply by existing. That's my gift to you." Orion appeared beside her, his arms coming around her expanded waist carefully. "Talking to our little revolutionary? Teaching them early that power is a responsibility, not a privilege. They're lucky to have you as a mother." "Everyone keeps saying that." Vesper leaned back against his chest. "I'm starting to actually believe it." "Good." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because it's true. You're going to be extraordinary." "We're going to be extraordinary," she corrected. "Together." "Together," he agreed. And as the sun set over Moon's car, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose, Vesper felt something she'd never experienced in her first 27 years. Complete and absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 14. The Heir of Wolves. The labor began 3 weeks before it was supposed to, in the middle of a summer storm that howled against the palace walls like a living thing. Vesper woke to pain rippling through her abdomen and water soaking the sheets beneath her. For a moment, she simply lay there in confusion. Then another contraction hit, and clarity came with sharp urgency. "Orion." She shook his shoulder. "Orion, wake up." He was alert immediately, years of military training making him capable of going from sleep to full awareness in seconds. "What's wrong?" "The baby's coming. Now." She'd never seen him move so fast. Within minutes, the room flooded with healers, midwives, and attendants. Lady Marin appeared with calming efficiency, helping Vesper into a birthing gown while Orion paced like a caged wolf, the mate bond transmitting his panic, so clearly Vesper could taste it. "You need to calm down," she gasped between contractions. "Your anxiety is making this worse." "I can't calm down. You're in pain. Our child is coming early. What if something's wrong? What if?" "Orion." The head healer's voice cut through his spiral. "Your Majesty, either compose yourself or leave the room. Your distress is affecting the Luna Queen." He stopped pacing, visibly forcing control over his emotions. Then he moved to Vesper's side, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I'm here," he said, voice steadier. "I'm right here. You're going to be fine. The baby's going to be fine. And I'm not going anywhere. Promise. On my life.
On my crown.
On everything we've built together." His pale eyes held hers with fierce intensity. "You're the strongest person I know, Vesper. You survived things that should have broken you. You can survive this." Another contraction hit, stealing her breath. The head healer examined her quickly, then nodded with satisfaction. "Everything is progressing normally, Your Majesty. The baby is simply eager to arrive. Early, but not dangerously so." She smiled. "Your heir appears to have inherited your impatience. Or their father's inability to follow proper timelines," Vesper managed through gritted teeth. "Definitely your impatience," Orion replied, but his hand trembled where it held hers. The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of pain that rewrote Vesper's understanding of suffering. 14 hours of Orion refusing to leave despite healers suggesting he wait elsewhere. 14 hours of pushing and breathing and crying out until she was convinced she couldn't possibly continue. And then, as thunder cracked overhead and rain hammered the windows, a new sound joined the storm. A baby's first cry, loud, indignant, perfect. "It's a girl," the head healer announced, her voice thick with emotion. "A healthy, beautiful girl." Vesper collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure, and watched through tear-blurred vision as they cleaned and wrapped her daughter. Then the healer placed the tiny bundle in her arms, and Vesper's world realigned around this small, perfect creature. She was beautiful, pale blonde hair like her father, but with Vesper's brown eyes already visible despite the healers insisting newborns couldn't focus yet. She had stopped crying the moment she touched her mother's skin, as if recognizing home immediately. "Hello," Vesper whispered, tracing her daughter's impossibly soft cheek. "Hello, little one. I'm your mother." The baby made a small sound. Not quite a coo, but something content, and Vesper felt her heart crack open with love so fierce it physically hurt. "She's perfect." Orion breathed beside her, his voice wrecked with emotion. "Vesper, she's perfect. Do you want to hold her?" He nodded wordlessly, and Vesper carefully transferred their daughter into his arms. The contrast was striking. This powerful king, this warrior who defeated rogues and conspiracies, holding a tiny infant with such devastating gentleness it made Vesper cry all over again. "Hello, little star," Orion murmured to his daughter. "I'm your father, and I promise you, I swear to you, you'll never doubt your worth. You'll never feel less than. You'll grow up knowing you're loved absolutely and unconditionally." The baby yawned, a comically huge expression on such a small face, and Vesper laughed through her tears. "What will you name her?" Lady Marin asked softly. Vesper and Orion exchanged a glance, the question already answered through the mate bond. "Lyric," Vesper said. "Her name is Lyric Shadowvane." "It's perfect," the head healer said. "Princess Lyric, heir to Moonskar. The kingdom will rejoice." News of the birth spread through the palace within hours, and through the kingdom by morning. By the time Vesper woke from her exhausted post-labor sleep, crowds had gathered outside the palace gates, celebrating the arrival of an heir they'd waited decades to welcome. But inside Luna's tower, the world narrowed to just three. Vesper, Orion, and tiny Lyric, who seemed utterly unconcerned with being the most important baby in 12 territories. "She's so small," Orion marveled, watching Lyric sleep in the ornate cradle that had been used by royal infants for generations. "How is something this small also this perfect?" Carefully constructed, Vesper replied from the bed, still recovering. "Though I'm not eager to repeat the construction process anytime soon." "Understandable." He moved to sit beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. "How are you feeling?" "Like I just spent 14 hours doing the hardest thing I've ever done." She smiled slightly. "But also like I'd do it again if it meant having her." "You're extraordinary, you know that?" His voice was soft. "I watched you endure pain I can't imagine, and you never once gave up. Never once stopped fighting to bring her safely into the world. I'm her mother. Fighting for her is what I do now. And you'll be brilliant at it." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Just like you're brilliant at everything else you decide to do." Lyric stirred in her cradle, making small sounds that suggested waking. Vesper started to get up, but Orion was already there, carefully lifting their daughter and bringing her to the bed. "I think someone's hungry," he said, settling Lyric into Vesper's arms. What followed was fumbling and awkward and perfect, Vesper learning to feed her daughter while Orion hovered protectively, both of them figuring out parenthood in real time, without manuals or certainty. "We have no idea what we're doing," Vesper noted. "Not even a little bit," Orion agreed. "But we're doing it together, which seems like it should count for something." "Everything," Vesper said softly, watching Lyric's eyes drift closed contentedly. "It counts for everything." The council requested an audience 3 days after the birth, sooner than Vesper would have liked, but she understood their eagerness. She dressed in comfortable but formal clothing, braided her hair simply, and carried Lyric into the council chamber with Orion beside her. The reaction was immediate. Every council member rose, their expressions ranging from awe to genuine joy. Even Lord Garrett looked misty-eyed, which Vesper had thought impossible. "Your Majesties," he said formally, "the kingdom celebrates the birth of Princess Lyric. We're honored to finally meet the heir." "Thank you, Lord Garrett." Vesper adjusted Lyric in her arms as the baby yawned hugely. "Though I should clarify something before we proceed. Lyric is not simply an heir, she's a person. And she'll be raised to value character over title, compassion over authority, and service over privilege. Your Majesty, surely the princess requires proper royal education." "She does. And she'll receive it. But she'll also learn what it means to serve rather than rule. She'll understand that power is a responsibility, not a right." Vesper's voice was gentle but firm. "My daughter will never doubt her worth, but she'll also never take it for granted or use it to diminish others." Lady Marin leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. You're planning to raise her differently than traditional royal children. I'm planning to raise her the way I wish I'd been raised. With love instead of criticism. With encouragement instead of cruelty. With the understanding that her value exists independent of anyone's approval. Vesper looked down at Lyric's peaceful face. She'll know she's enough. Always has been, always will be. That's my promise to her. The silence that followed was contemplative rather than critical. Finally, Lord Garrett spoke. Your Majesty, I believe the kingdom is fortunate to have both you and the princess. The next generation will benefit from your wisdom. Our wisdom, Vesper corrected, glancing at Orion. We're doing this together. Together, he confirmed, his hand settling on her shoulder in silent support. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, tiny milestones, and learning to balance ruling a kingdom with raising a daughter. Lyric proved to be a remarkably content baby, quick to smile, slow to fuss, and fascinated by everything around her. By 3 months, she was already showing signs of the power healers had predicted, her aura visible even to those without special sensitivity. She's going to be formidable, Kieran observed during one of his visits. He was surprisingly good with babies, making faces that sent Lyric into peals of laughter. I've never seen a child this young with such a strong presence. Takes after her father, Vesper said, watching Orion hold their daughter with practiced ease now. Take after both of you, Kieran corrected. She has his power and your resilience. That combination is going to be remarkable. As Lyric grew, Vesper noticed something else. The kingdom itself seemed to be transforming. The equality accords she'd implemented were taking root. Villages that had struggled for generations were thriving under support programs. Children who would have grown up believing they had no worth were discovering potential they'd never imagined existed. And everywhere Vesper traveled, now with Lyric carefully secured against her chest, wolves approached with stories of how her policies had changed their lives. My daughter is in school now, one mother said, tears streaming, because of your education reforms. She's learning to read, Your Majesty. She has a future. My pack received healers just in time, an elderly male reported. The illness that was spreading, your people stopped it before it could devastate us. You saved our children. Story after story, gratitude after gratitude, proof that using power to serve rather than control actually worked. On Lyric's first birthday, the kingdom celebrated with festivals in every territory. Vesper and Orion took their daughter to multiple celebrations, letting the common wolves meet their princess, showing that royalty could be accessible rather than distant. At one village, a small border pack that had been part of Vesper's initial relief program, an elderly woman approached with a gift. A hand-carved wolf, simple but beautifully crafted. For the princess, she said. So, she remembers where her mother came from. So she knows that great things can grow from small beginnings. Vesper accepted the gift with trembling hands, fighting tears. Thank you. She'll treasure it always. That night, back in their chambers with Lyric finally asleep after an exhausting day, Vesper placed the carved wolf in her daughter's room where she'd see it every day. What are you thinking? Orion asked, appearing behind her. That year ago, I was terrified of becoming a mother. Terrified of damaging her the way I was damaged. Vesper turned to face him. But I think we're doing okay. Better than okay. His arms came around her waist. You're the mother you needed but never had. Just like I knew you would be. We're the parents we needed, Vesper corrected. Both of us. Together. Together, he agreed, kissing her softly. They stood like that for a long moment, watching their daughter sleep. This small person who represented hope and future and second chances. This child who would grow up knowing her worth because her parents had learned theirs the hard way and refused to let her suffer the same. Do you ever miss it? Orion asked quietly. The simplicity of before? When you were just Vesper, and I was just a stranger fixing your roof? Sometimes, Vesper admitted. But then I remember that before meant believing I was worthless. Meant surviving rather than living. Meant accepting cruelty as normal. She turned in his arms to look at him properly. I don't miss that version of myself. I'm grateful to her for surviving long enough to become who I am now, but I don't want to go back. Neither do I. His voice was soft. Though I do miss having you to myself occasionally. Our daughter is remarkably demanding for someone who can't even walk yet. Vesper laughed quietly. She takes after her father that way too. Absolutely not. I'm very reasonable and low maintenance. You required an entire kingdom's resources to investigate one conspiracy. That's different. That's work. His eyes glinted with amusement. I'm delightful in my personal life. You're impossible in every aspect of your life. It's part of your charm. You think I'm charming? I think you're mine. She kissed him deeply. And that's better than charming. From her cradle, Lyric made a small sound. Not distress, just the unconscious vocalizations of baby dreams. Both parents immediately looked over, some instinct making them check that she was safe, comfortable, loved. We should let her sleep, Vesper whispered. Agreed. Though I give it 2 hours before she wakes us up demanding attention. Hour and a half, Vesper countered. Wanna bet? What are the stakes? Loser has to handle the next council meeting alone.
Deal.
They shook on it solemnly, then retreated to their own chambers, leaving the door cracked so they'd hear if Lyric needed them. Vesper had been right. Lyric woke exactly 90 minutes later, and Orion graciously admitted defeat while warming milk for their demanding daughter. This was their life now. Negotiations and council meetings punctuated by diaper changes and midnight feedings. Political strategy sessions interrupted by baby giggles. The weight of crowns balanced against the weight of tiny bodies falling asleep on their shoulders. It was chaos and beauty and exhaustion and joy all tangled together. And Vesper wouldn't change a single thing. She was Luna Queen of Moonscar, mother to an extraordinary daughter, mate to a king who'd seen her worth when no one else bothered to look. But more than any title or role, she was herself, finally, fully, completely herself. And that was the greatest gift of all. Chapter 15. The Circle Complete. 5 years after Lyric's birth, Vesper stood in the throne room and listened to a petition that made her blood run cold. Your Majesty, the young woman said, her voice trembling. My name is Iris. I'm from Ravencrest, a village 3 days north of here. And I'm here because no one else will help us. Vesper leaned forward, giving Iris her full attention. Beside her, Orion waited silently. He'd learned over the years to let Vesper handle petitions from common wolves. They trusted her in ways they'd never trust a king. Tell me everything, Vesper said gently. What emerged was a story horrifyingly familiar. A village alpha who ruled through cruelty rather than service. Families broken by poverty and neglect. Children growing up believing they had no worth because circumstances of birth placed them in the wrong pack, the wrong family, the wrong side of an arbitrary hierarchy. It was Thornhaven all over again. Different names, same suffering. Please, Iris whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know I'm nobody. I know I have no right to ask the Luna Queen for help. But you're our last hope. If you don't intervene, more will die. More will be destroyed. Vesper stood, moving down from the dais to take Iris's hands in hers. The young woman gasped at the contact. Queens didn't touch common petitioners, but Vesper held firm. You're not nobody, Vesper said clearly. You're someone brave enough to seek help when others wouldn't. Someone strong enough to speak truth to power despite being terrified. Someone who matters simply because you exist, not because of what you can offer or what family you were born into. Your Majesty will help Ravencrest. Immediately. I'll personally lead the intervention team. Vesper glanced at Orion, who nodded once in agreement. Give Lord Kieran all the details about your village, locations, names, specific instances of abuse. We'll handle this. Iris collapsed with relief, so profound she could barely stand. Vesper held her while she cried, remembering what it felt like to be so desperate for validation that even basic kindness felt overwhelming. After Iris left with Kieran, Orion approached Vesper with a complicated expression. You know what this means, he said quietly. Ravencrest Alpha is technically within his rights under Old Pack law. Intervening means challenging traditions that predate our reign. Then it's time those traditions changed. Vesper's voice was steel beneath silk. I won't watch another generation of wolves grow up believing they're worthless because someone with power decided their suffering was acceptable. I'm not arguing. Orion's hand found hers. I'm just warning you that this will be politically complicated. Some alphas will see it as overreach. Let them. I'd rather be remembered as the Luna Queen who overreached to protect the powerless than the one who maintained tradition while wolves suffered. She met his eyes. We have the authority to intervene. We have the resources. We have a moral obligation. That's enough. Then we go to Ravencrest. His voice carried quiet pride.
Together.
They left within days. Vesper, Orion, Kieran, and a contingent of guards large enough to make their authority undeniable. They left Lyric in the care of Lady Marin and the palace staff, though saying goodbye to their daughter was harder than either parent anticipated. I'll be good, Mama, Lyric promised seriously. At 5 years old, she was already showing signs of the remarkable wolf she'd become, intelligent, compassionate, and possessing power that made even experienced warriors nervous. I'll practice my letters and help Lady Marin and not turn the guards into wolves. That last one is very important, Vesper said, fighting a smile. Lyric had discovered her shifting abilities early and had an unfortunate tendency to accidentally trigger transformations in others when she got excited. Remember, power is a responsibility. Power is a responsibility, Lyric repeated dutifully. Then she threw her arms around Vesper's neck. Come back soon. As soon as I can, little star. Vesper held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her, sunshine and wild places, and something uniquely Lyric. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. More than all the mountains? More than all the mountains. More than chocolate? Well, Vesper pretended to consider. Maybe equal to chocolate. Lyric giggled and released her, running to hug Orion with the same fierce affection. Watching them together, this powerful king brought to his knees by a 5-year-old's love, made Vesper's chest ache with happiness. They were a family, imperfect, unconventional, but undeniably real. Ravencrest was worse than Iris had described. The village was larger than Thornhaven but carried the same atmosphere of defeat. Wolves moved through streets with heads down, shoulders hunched, the weight of systematic cruelty visible in every gesture. The Alpha, a scarred male named Voss, met them at the village edge with barely concealed hostility. Your Majesties, he said, the title sounding like an insult. To what do we owe this unexpected honor? We received reports of concerning conditions, Orion replied, his voice carrying authority that made Voss unconsciously step back. We're here to investigate. Investigate what? How do I run my own pack? Voss's laugh was ugly. I rule within my rights under pack law. What I do with my wolves is my business. Not when those wolves are suffering under your rule. Vesper stepped forward, and something in her expression made Voss falter. Not when children are growing up believing they're worthless, because you've systematically destroyed their sense of worth. Not when families are broken because you govern through fear rather than service. You can't. I can. Vesper's voice was quiet but absolute. I'm Luna, Queen of Moonscar, and every wolf in this kingdom is under my protection, including those you've been abusing. What followed was a comprehensive investigation that revealed systematic cruelty spanning years. Voss had created a hierarchy that rewarded his favorites and punished anyone he perceived as weak. He'd diverted pack resources to his own family while letting others starve. He'd normalized violence as discipline and mockery as motivation. It was everything Vesper had survived, given official sanction, and allowed to flourish unchecked. This ends now, she said during the formal hearing where evidence was presented before the entire village. Alpha Voss, you're removed from leadership effective immediately. Your title is stripped, your authority revoked. You'll be exiled from Ravencrest and forbidden from holding any position of power in this kingdom. You can't do this. Voss snarled. Pack law is being reformed. Orion's voice cut through the protest like a blade. The Luna Queen has drafted new governance standards that prioritize wolf welfare over alpha authority. The council approved them last month. This is the first implementation. Vesper pulled out a formal document, the culmination of months of work with the council, crafting laws that protected the vulnerable while maintaining necessary pack structure. Going forward, she announced to the assembled village, alphas serve at the pleasure of both the crown and their packs. Systematic abuse results in immediate removal. Resources must be distributed equitably. And any wolf who feels their alpha is failing them has the right to petition directly to the Luna Queen for intervention. The silence was absolute. Then someone in the back of the crowd started crying, sobs of relief so profound they were almost painful to witness. Others joined in. Within moments, half the village was weeping openly, releasing years of pain and fear they'd believed was simply their permanent condition. Vesper let them cry. Let them feel whatever they need to feel. And when the initial wave of emotion passed, she spoke again. I know what you've survived, she said quietly. I grew up in a village like this one, with a family like some of yours, learning to believe I was worthless because people with power told me I was. I know how that feels. How it carves pieces out of your soul until you can barely remember who you were before the cruelty began. She looked around at faces marked by suffering she recognized intimately. But you're not worthless. You never were. The failure was always theirs. Those who had power and chose cruelty over compassion. Those who saw suffering and did nothing. Those who built their authority on breaking others down rather than building them up. Her voice strengthened. Ravencrest will be rebuilt. We're bringing in healers, builders, counselors who specialize in helping wolves recover from systematic abuse. We're implementing support systems so this never happens again. And we're installing new leadership, someone you choose, someone who understands that authority is earned through service, not demanded through fear. Who? Someone called. Who could possibly understand what we've been through? Vesper smiled and gestured to Iris, who'd been standing at the edge of the crowd. Someone who lived it. Someone who was brave enough to ask for help when others wouldn't. Someone who cares more about her pack's welfare than her own comfort. Iris's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, I can't, I'm not. You're exactly what Ravencrest needs. Vesper's tone was gentle but firm. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about caring enough to try. About recognizing worth in others, because you've learned to see it in yourself. Will you accept the position? Iris looked around at her pack, wolves she'd grown up with, suffered alongside, fought to protect by seeking outside help. And slowly she nodded. I'll try. I can't promise I'll be good at it, but I'll try. That's all anyone can ask. Vesper moved to stand beside her, a symbolic gesture of support. You won't be alone. The Crown will provide resources, training, and ongoing support. And if you need help, if you're ever unsure, you can reach out directly to me. The implementation took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of systematic reform, of bringing in specialists, of teaching wolves who'd learned helplessness how to recognize their own agency again. Vesper worked alongside everyone, not as a distant queen, but as someone who understood intimately what they were healing from. She sat with traumatized children and taught them that fear wasn't normal. She counseled families torn apart by years of systematic cruelty. She held space for wolves to express rage and grief they'd been suppressing for survival. And slowly, Ravencrest began to transform. On their final evening before returning to Moon's car, Iris found Vesper sitting alone near the village well, the same well where Vesper had first met Orion 5 years ago in Thornhaven. Your Majesty, may I join you? Of course. And please, when we're alone, call me Vesper. Iris settled beside her, quiet for a moment. How did you do it? How did you go from being like us to being that? She gestured vaguely at everything Vesper represented. I was seen, Vesper said simply. Someone looked at me and saw worth instead of worthlessness. Potential instead of limitation. A person instead of a problem. She smiled slightly. And once someone sees you that way, really sees you, it becomes harder to believe the lies you've been told about yourself. Is that why you came here? Because someone saw you. I came here because no one should have to wait for someone else to see their worth. Because growing up believing you're worthless damages you in ways that take years to heal. Vesper's voice was gentle. I came because I was you once, Iris. And someone helped me. Now I'm helping others. Will it always hurt? Iris's question was small. The memories of how we were treated?
Yes.
But less over time. And eventually you'll be able to look back at who you were, who you survived being, and feel proud rather than ashamed. Vesper took Iris's hand. You're going to be an extraordinary alpha. Not because you're perfect, but because you understand what it means to suffer, and you'll never inflict that on others. I hope you're right. I know I am. Vesper squeezed her hand once, then released it. And when doubt creeps in, because it will, remember that the Luna Queen believed in you enough to trust you with an entire pack. That has to count for something. Iris's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. It counts for everything. The journey back to Moon's car took 3 days, and Vesper spent most of it in thoughtful silence. What are you thinking? Orion asked on the second evening as they made camp. That this can't be the last intervention. There are probably dozens of villages like Ravencrest. Hundreds of wolves suffering under alphas who abuse their authority. She looked at him. We need systematic reform. Not just responding to crises, but preventing them. Agreed. What do you propose? Regular inspections of all packs. Anonymous reporting systems for abuse. Training for new alphas that emphasizes service over authority. Vesper's mind was racing, connecting pieces. And consequences for failure, real consequences, not just warnings that everyone ignores. The council will object. Some alphas will see it as overreach. Let them. Vesper's voice carried steel she developed over 5 years of ruling. I'd rather be accused of caring too much than allow wolves to suffer, because I was too cautious to act. Orion studied her face in the firelight, and his expression was complicated, pride, love, and something almost like awe. You know what you've become? He said quietly.
What?
Everything I needed, but didn't know to ask for. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. You've transformed this kingdom more in 5 years than I accomplished in 20. Not through force or fear, but through remembering what it felt like to suffer and refusing to let others experience the same. We transformed it together, Vesper corrected. You led the transformation. I just supported it. His voice was soft. And I'm so proud of you. Proud of the mother you've become, the queen you've become, the person you've always been beneath the damage. Vesper turned in his arms to kiss him properly. We should get back to Lyric. I miss our daughter. She probably turned the palace guards into wolves at least twice by now. Only twice? You underestimate her creativity. They laughed together, and the sound carried through the night like a promise, that joy could exist alongside purpose, that love could thrive despite duty, that families could be built from broken pieces if you were willing to do the work. When they finally arrived back at Moon's car, Lyric met them at the gates running at full speed, her blonde hair streaming behind her like a banner. Mama.
Papa.
You're back. Vesper caught her daughter and spun her around, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling pieces of herself settle back into place now that they were reunited. We're back, little star. Did you behave for Lady Marin? Mostly. Lyric's grin was impish. I only accidentally turned 2 guards into wolves, and I apologized both times. Only 2? That's an improvement. Orion ruffled his daughter's hair affectionately. What else did you do? I learned a new song. And I practiced my letters. And I helped in the kitchens. The lyrics bounced excitedly. And Lady Marin says I'm getting better at controlling my power, so maybe soon I won't accidentally shift people anymore. Maybe, Vesper agreed, though privately she suspected their daughter would be accidentally shifting people for at least another few years. That evening, after Lyric was finally asleep and the palace settled into nighttime quiet, Vesper and Orion stood on their balcony overlooking the kingdom. Do you ever think about where we started? Vesper asked quietly. You in disguise, me in that cottage with the broken roof, neither of us knowing what we'd become? Every day. Orion's arm came around her waist. And I'm grateful for every choice that led us here. Even the painful ones. Even the lies? Even those. Because they taught us that trust has to be earned and maintained, not just assumed. He turned her to face him. We've built something remarkable, Vesper. A family. A kingdom. A life where wolves who are told they were worthless discover they never were. We're just getting started, Vesper replied. There's so much more to do. So many more wolves to help. So many systems to reform. Then we'll do it. His voice was certain. Together. The way we've done everything else. Together, Vesper agreed. She looked out over Moon's car. This kingdom she'd inherited accidentally. This responsibility she'd grown into gradually. This home she'd built deliberately. And she thought about the girl she'd been 5 years ago, kneeling in Thornhaven's dirt while her mother destroyed her publicly. That girl would never have believed this was possible. But that girl had also never given up, never stopped trying, never let cruelty extinguish the small flame of hope she'd carried through years of suffering. And now that flame had become a wildfire, transforming not just her own life, but countless others who'd been told they had no worth, no future, no right to dream of something better. Thank you, Vesper said suddenly. For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For believing I was worth choosing when everyone else had convinced me I wasn't. For giving me the opportunity to become who I was always meant to be. Vesper. Orion cupped her face gently. I didn't give you anything. I just recognized what was already there. You became extraordinary because you always were. You just needed someone to acknowledge it. Then thank you for acknowledging it. Always. He kissed her softly. Now and forever. That's my vow to you. From inside their chambers, Lyric's voice called out. Mama? I can't sleep. Can you tell me a story? Vesper smiled and pulled away from Orion. Duty calls. The best kind of duty, he agreed, following her inside. They settled on either side of Lyric's bed, and their daughter looked between them expectantly. What story do you want tonight, little star? Vesper asked. Tell me about the worthless daughter who became a queen, Lyric said seriously. That's my favorite. Vesper's throat tightened. You know that story already. I know. But I like hearing it again. Because it reminds me that people can become more than others say they are. Lyric's brown eyes, so like her mother's, were wise beyond her years. And that being kind matters more than being powerful. All right, Vesper said softly. Once upon a time, in a small village that had forgotten how to hope, there lived a daughter everyone called worthless. She told the story, their story, while Orion listened and Lyric's eyes gradually drooped closed. She told it honestly, not hiding the pain but emphasizing the resilience. Not pretending the journey was easy, but celebrating how far they'd traveled. And when Lyric finally fell asleep, lulled by the familiar tale of impossible transformation, Vesper sat beside her daughter and felt complete. She was Vesper Shadowvane, Luna Queen of Moonskar, mother to an extraordinary daughter, mate to a king who'd chosen her above all others, advocate for wolves who'd been told they had no worth. But more than any title or role, she was herself, finally, fully, completely herself. The worthless daughter had become a queen. And in doing so, she'd proven that worth was never about what others believed. It was about what you chose to become despite them.
The end.
Thanks for following Vesper's journey from dismissed village woman to Luna Queen who transforms an entire kingdom through compassion, resilience, and refusing to let cruelty define her worth. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.